I'll call to order the Regional Municipality Appeal Council meeting for Thursday, June the 14th. Roll call. All are present except Mayor Crombie is going to be late due to other municipal business. And Councillor Parrish is absent, and Councillor Sporvieri is on other municipal business, and Mayor Thompson, I believe, is going to be a little late. Approval of the minutes of the May 24th, 2018 Regional Council meeting. Moved by Councillor Grove, seconded by Councillor Kovac. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor McFadden, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. That the agenda for the June 14, 2018 Regional Council meeting include a delegation from Joan Reese, CSR retail employee, regarding the retail holiday shopping bylaw to be dealt with under delegations item 7.8, and further that the agenda for the June 14, 2018 Regional Council meeting include a delegation from Kathleen Matthews, retail worker, regarding the retail holiday shopping bylaw to be dealt with under delegation item 7.9, and further that the agenda for the June 14th, 2018 Regional Council meeting be approved as amended. Any discussion? All in favor then? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Moves us to the consent agenda. We'll go items related to Public Works. 8.1 and 8.2 are presentations, so we'll hold them. 8.3. Going to hold. 8.4. Consent. 8.5. Consent. 8.6. Consent. Communications 9.1. Yes, Councillor Carlson. Oh, do you want to hold that? No, we will. There we go. 8.4 has been held. 9.1 then, under communications. Consent. 9.2. Consent. Items related to health. 10.2. Consent. 10.3. Consent. 12 items related to human services. 12.1. Consent. 12.2. Consent. 12.3. We'll hold that. Thank you. 12.4 has a presentation, so we'll hold that. Items related to enterprise programs and services. 14.1 has a presentation, so we'll hold that. 14.2. Consent. 14.3 is, I think, in relation to a delegation, so we'll hold that. 14.4. Consent. 14.5. Consent. 14.6. Consent. That's it, I guess, for the consent vote.
17, I think we'll hold it for Councillor Innes.
Oh, yeah, 17.1 will hold for Councillor Innes. Councillor Sato?
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I think I might have a conflict on 14.5. I have family that works for the Region of Peel. So I'm going to declare it. I'm sorry, I missed that at the beginning.
Okay. Councillor Moore?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sato, for that, because I missed it as well. I'll declare a conflict of interest as I have family working for the region. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Miles?
Yes, I'd declare conflict as I have a member of my family working for the region. But I guess I can declare conflict for me too because we get the same benefit plan. Yes, we do. Thank you.
Okay, have you got a motion on the consent, or?
I do, but I don't have them all written down, so you just take.
Okay. We'll take the motion on consent as said, moved by Councillor Mahoney, seconded by Councillor Carlson. All in favor then? Oh, no, it's recorded vote. My,
Can we vote because we have
Votes? All the items for consent except for that one item,
yeah.
so we'll do.
yeah, we'll separate it. The first motion will be
Everything else?
everything else except the 14.5.
Councillor Groves, if you could vote, please. Councillor Maderos?
So that carries. And then on 14.5, I'll take the same mover and seconder, and a separate recorded vote on the 14.5. And that's recorded.
Just don't vote at all. Councillor Gibson? Downey?
And that passes. Thank you. All right. With respect to the delegations today, I just, I'm going to go in a little bit of a different order here and start with 7.5. And we'll call Sandra up first, but before I do, and then we'll move to 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 7.6, and 7.8,
And the one you just added, 7.9.
and then 7.9. And then we'll go back to David on 7.7. So our first delegation then would be Sandra Rubnaren, Director, Client Services, Family Services Appeal, presenting the work that Family Services Appeal Institute on Violence Prevention is doing in regards to human trafficking. Welcome.
Thank you. I've been introduced already, and I just want to acknowledge and thank the council for allowing me to present here today, and acknowledge and thank those who came to support this presentation as well. This is an issue that's a grave issue, and so I want to start off my presentation with three stories. So far away in Thailand, there is a 10-year-old girl, the single mother with a 10-year-old girl, and she needs to survive, and so she sells her 10-year-old into slavery, into sexual exploitation. Then in New York City, in an apartment in Brooklyn, New York, there is an 18-year-old with two sisters. She rented an apartment so that she could provide money and housing for her two sisters by trafficking her two sisters. Then in Ontario, right in Peel, in Brampton, there's a kid who gets dropped off at school. She's 14 years old, but she's picked up by her pimp, and then she's dropped off in the afternoon at that same school and goes home. 6 months pass by, and her grades are dropping, and there's no call. So this is an issue that's not just international, not just our neighboring issue, but it's right in our own backyard. It's an issue that has 20.9 million victims worldwide, and it has $150.3 billion industry. So this is a real issue we're dealing with. This is the magnitude of the problem at an international level, and this is trafficking in persons rate actual incidents, Peel compared to Ontario. And Peel compared to Ontario, the reality is that we have higher rates compared to Canada and Toronto of human trafficking, especially in the year 2016. So this is an issue that we, as a region, are forced to deal with, are forced to address. At Family Services of Peel, we applied for funding to look at this issue through the Ministry of Community and Social Services. And through that funding, that's a 3-year funding, we established a goal to increase service providers' capacity in Peel region to support survivors of trafficking and their families on their journey to recovery and healing. Our objectives, as we boiled that down, was to engage, collaborate, coordinate, and build community awareness engagement in the development of strategic approaches on human trafficking in Peel. We also want to engage survivors because it's important to have their voices as we plan services and approaches to working with them. Develop best practice that is evidence-based and survivor-informed, inclusive of a robust evaluation methodology. And to strengthen our service providers' partnerships, which is important when you're dealing with any social issue. You can't do it in isolation. You have to have healthy collaborations and healthy partnerships. To train social health and justice professionals in seamless services for HD survivors as well. So we have 3 research questions that's guiding our project at this time. Who are the survivors of human trafficking in Peel? What are the unique services needs of services for survivors of human trafficking? And how can we increase the response to those needs by service providers and communities? So we're starting from a ground level to build a solid base so that we can move into services that meets the needs of this community. And what have we accomplished to date? What have we been working on? So we have a Seamless Services for Mental Health, Addiction, and Trauma Committee, and this committee has been established over 7 years now, and it's been looking at trauma. And now it's been looking at trauma as it relates to human trafficking. We have the establishment and advisory committee, and I think in your literature there that you got from us, it has the names and the pictures of those who are part of that advisory committee. And that establishes the fact that we do strongly believe that we can only work on these issues if we establish strong coordination, strong collaborations, and strong partnerships. And we've completed as well a lit review. We have done a demographic data analysis, and all these documents are also available. We have done face-to-face interviews and focus groups, and you'll see a little bit later some of the responses we got from that. We also distributed a PIVP, which is Peel Institute on Violence Prevention, a newsletter that's distributed nationally, focused on human trafficking. In your package, you also got a poster presentation that outlines the 3-year project we're working on. And more recently, on May 29th, we presented to the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights in Ottawa on this issue. And this is what, when we look at what the survivors are telling us, that's what pushes us forward. So one of the things when we did our focus group, we had voices of survivors and their mothers talking to us. And here's what one mother said: wherever mothers turned to, they did not get the professional help they needed. Example, police, health services, and/or counseling services, and they try to help their daughters. So for me, there's absolutely no support. There's no services at the front end to help us parents to prevent this from happening. And I knew in my mind that this could happen to her. And I still could not stop it. I could not stop it with the help of police. I could not stop it with the help of social worker. I could not stop it with the help from agencies. It is like a snowballing effect. There is nothing in place to help us parents to help stop this process. This is the mother of a survivor.
Sandra, just to note, I hate to interrupt, but you've surpassed the 5 minutes. If I could get a motion from council to extend, moved by Councillor Madero, second by Councillor Miles, all in favor? And if you could just maybe summarize in the next couple of minutes would be appreciated.
Okay, so I'll go to the last slide.
Thank you.
Recommendations, what we have come up with. There needs to be a collaborative effort, having a lead organization, being able to coordinate, to develop a strategy, to work in partnership so that we can have seamless services and we can be able to have a pathways created with navigation services. We need to have evidence-based, what constitutes best practice and what are the best prevention and best intervention strategies. We need to have a trauma screening tool. We're working on that, and we will have one by 2020. Education and outreach targeting to appropriate demographics. Peer-to-peer as a support service is needed, and training, culturally sensitive with an evaluation process. And so our recommendations based on the work we're doing, we'd like to recommend that while there's good work being done, the need to develop more evidence-based work is important to look at what we have so we can pull it all together so Peel can become a standard and how we work to address this huge social issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and if you'd stay in place, Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, through the chair. I'd like to move receipt of the delegation, and I think after the speakers, I'd like to move also that we call up Jason Hastings, our Director of Strategic Initiative, regarding a strategy to address human sex trafficking in Peel Region. I think would be appropriate after this delegation.
Thank you. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess a question that I have, and thank you, Sandra, for your delegation. And I know we had something like this before us, and I think the police were reporting on it, and I know that there've been a lot of arrests made with some of those folks who are trafficking these young ladies. So, and I guess through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure how we do this, but the recommendation is calling for advocacy to the province for funding. Do we do that through a motion? Do we do that through maybe a letter that you write? Now that we have a new government in place as well, I think this would be an appropriate time, so.
I believe it's included in the report, which we'll bring forward.
So a
After.
separate letter is not necessary from you?
I don't think it's necessary. Yeah.
All right.
Are you finished?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
Mayor Jeffrey then.
I just wanted to say thank you. I think as someone who sat on the Police Services Board, there's three of us that sit on the board that got an update about this. I think it was last year, and it was a real eye-opener as to what's happening in Peel. So I appreciate what you said at the beginning of your presentation. This isn't happening somewhere else. It's happening in our neighborhoods, to our friends and to our neighbors. I think this cannot just be talked about here, and that communication to the public to recognize signs, I think is very important. So one of the things that we did, or I did, is to approach our recreation department, because they deal with a lot of young people, and if you know what to look for, you have the better chance of catching this early and perhaps saving somebody. So I would encourage other members of council to talk to their recreation departments in their various cities to have this conversation, to make sure that the people that you have in charge who work with young people, who recruit them for summer jobs, may be able to save a life early if they know what to look for. So this is an extremely difficult cancer to remove out of our society, and I applaud the work that you're doing, so thank you very much.
Councillor Starr.
Yeah, just, excuse me, as a quick comment, I attended last weekend Ratanak. I'm sure you're familiar with them. It's the group that's trying to prevent the slavery and selling of young girls in Cambodia. And I didn't realize until I read about it and went online and what they're doing here in Canada to try to help, how worldwide this problem is. And, thank you. It's also a real education process that we all have to go through, because sometimes, people don't want to talk about it, but it's there.
Yes.
And whatever, the education part of it, and I know council will support, the direction of trying to eliminate this. I think that's a good word, cancer. I mean, that's what it is. And for people to benefit from young girls and boys, by the way.
Yeah.
Terrible. I mean, I just, like I say, last weekend, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing and reading about. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandra. I know Councillor Medeiros, you moved receipt of the deputation. If Councillor Miles would second that. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then I'll call on Jason Hastings if he'd kind of come down to the podium and make your presentation, please. And then we'll bring forward the report.
Well, thank you, Chair and
Welcome.
Council, for allowing me to present the strategy to address human sex trafficking in Peel Region this morning. I guess just before I begin, I want to acknowledge some of the service providers who've come out to support the presentation this morning, who are here. The biggest risk factor for being a victim of human sex trafficking is being a girl. Every day, girls between the ages of 13 and 17 are recruited into the sex trade and victimized as many as 10 times a day, right here in our community. This strategy aims to strengthen prevention efforts and offer victims better ways out so that they can go on to live healthy and successful lives. At the meeting of Regional Council on May 11, 2017, members of the Peel Human Trafficking Service Providers Committee delegated to seek endorsement for a proposal to the Provincial Anti-Human Trafficking Community Support Fund. The Peel Human Trafficking Service Providers Committee is comprised of a range of Peel and GTA agency representatives from the health, legal, and social services sectors that provide services to address the issue of human trafficking. The group is chaired by Constable Joy Brown from the Peel Regional Police. Although the committee was not successful in securing funding, Regional Council was supportive of Human Services staff exploring options to address human sex trafficking in Peel Region. As we did our work, we found that there are a number of community agencies doing great work in this area. However, the system of services is still difficult for survivors to navigate. There's a lack of dedicated housing options, which presents an immediate barrier to exits. And we do have gaps in our service system, which means survivors have to be referred outside of the region. Here's some facts to help you better understand the issue. The average age for entrenched females in the human sex trade is 17 years old. The average age of entry is 13 and a half years old. These are North America-wide figures. 63% of victims trafficked to, through, or from Ontario were Canadian citizens. The other 37% of victims were from a number of countries, including Hungary, Czech Republic, Afghanistan, the United States, etc. Victims can come from any neighborhood, ethnicity, and socioeconomic background. The risk factors for victims include mental health issues, body image issues, learning disabilities, social isolation, child abuse experience, and poverty. The common theme is that girls and youth who struggle with low self-esteem are at higher risk. 63% of all criminal human sex trafficking investigations in Canada are being conducted in the GTA. Peel Region and Toronto are the two most common regions within the GTA to which victims are moved. So as you heard just now in the presentation from Family Services of Peel, there's work being done to collect data and get a more accurate picture of the issue in Peel. However, experts that were consulted report that there is a higher prevalence of human sex trafficking occurring in Peel Region. The conclusion was reached through a few ways. Discussions with provincial and federal experts, like the director of the Office of Human Trafficking at the provincial level, the RCMP's lead on human trafficking. We also spoke with local frontline service providers from health, legal, and social service sectors. And we looked at the police data and had consultations with Peel Regional Police, and they all had the same conclusion. So the strategy we're proposing today is intended to address the gaps that exist in the service system. It's focused on three pillars: prevention, intervention in the form of programming, and exits, mainly in the form of housing. Prevention. We would like to prevent this from happening in the first place, so raising awareness and educating girls about the warning signs is key. Perpetrators often manipulate their victims in such a way that many don't even realize that they're being taken advantage of. We will work with Peel and community service providers and the police in the delivery of prevention education, school boards to access children at vulnerable ages, and Peel Children's Aid Society as our conduit to engage children in care and their guardians. We want to find ways to get the message out and ensure prevention education is provided consistently throughout the region. In fact, just this week, we received an e-training module to assist our frontline staff who may be in contact with victims so that they can recognize the warning signs and offer supports. Interventions. When we looked at the current service pathway, it was set up so that survivors had to travel throughout the region to access a range of services. Promising practice suggests that bringing all of the core services that a survivor needs under one roof in a hub setting yields much better outcomes. The dedicated services hub would service individuals at risk, engaged in, or transitioning out of sex trafficking. The hub will be situated in a nondescript office building, preferably embedded with legal, health, and social services providers. It will be in a different location than the safe and transitional houses, but will be in close proximity to dedicated housing. The hub will offer core services as well as on-site complementary services. Core services will be offered by a lead agency and will include central coordination, system navigation, case management, trauma counseling, and outreach. The site will also host community partners that will provide in-kind complementary services within the hub. These would be things like basic health care, addiction support, legal aid, education, and employment supports. In total, the hub will host approximately 40 service providers from within the GTA that have expressed an interest to offer on-site services for survivors. Since developing similar hubs in other jurisdictions, demand for these services has increased. Last year, Covenant House in Toronto engaged 46 survivors in core programming and assisted another 144 survivors through outreach and referrals. Exits and housing. Our consultation with survivors, experts, and service providers were clear that one of the biggest barriers to survivors exiting the system is the lack of good housing options. Defining the right housing option and preserving the integrity of these options strictly for survivors of sex trafficking is integral in engaging survivors long term. In the wrong setting, survivors can be vulnerable to re-victimization. They require safe, supportive housing that protects their person and restores their dignity, confidentiality, and privacy. Supports for survivors of human sex trafficking are amongst the most complex to provide. For child survivors, kinship care is the best option. This is fostering by relatives or others described as family by a child's immediate family members. So it could be an approved family member, a godparent, or a family friend. This permits the child to remain connected with their family and builds a sense of belonging, safety, and security for the child. The approach aligns with and is supported by the Peel Children's Aid Society. For youth and adult survivors, we recommend the creation of 2 forms of dedicated housing. The first is emergency housing, also known as a safe house. This is for survivors in the first stages of recovery, the crisis and stabilization phase. This phase is the period immediately after they exit, up to 4 months. 24/7 on-site staff support is required to manage the safe house. Staff is responsible to make sure survivors are being connected and pursuing supports and ensuring no re-recruitment takes place on site. The second housing type is transitional housing. This is available for survivors who are in the transitional and assisted living phase for up to 2 years. Survivors in this phase are receiving supports and becoming more independent. The 2-year time frame gives them time to find more long-term housing options, which could include social housing or rent subsidies provided by the region. These housing components form a pathway that allows survivors to have their needs met in the short, intermediate, and long term. The outcomes from this pilot will establish baseline data to better define the current situation in Peel Region and the supports survivors need to be successful. Cost per service unit, based on the $1.8 million budget and approximately 200 service users anticipated per year, equates to $9,000 per survivor. A 2015 study on the social return on investment conducted by the Center to End All Sexual Exploitation showed a 5-year rate of return of nearly 3 to 1 in social value for every $1 invested in programming, similar to what's being proposed here. Another study by the University of Manitoba in 2004 focused on the economic costs of sexual exploitation. The findings cited lifetime personal, fiscal, and societal costs, including costs for government services and nonprofit providers, total $1.1 million per victim. The evidence suggests that the investments being proposed here will create a more comprehensive and coordinated network of supports in Peel. Considering the average age and vulnerability of victims being trafficked, providing these supports has a real possibility of turning victims into survivors and setting girls and young women back on the path to healthy lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Downing.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Jason, and to your team as well. I'd also like to take a minute just to acknowledge Jody Miller and Danny Mills from Elizabeth Fry and Our Place Peel. They sit around the committee table, as do I, and are a driving force. And unfortunately, Constable Joy Brown couldn't be here this morning, but hopefully she's enjoying a beach somewhere. She deserves it. She has been a huge force behind the committee. As I sit around that table and I listen to the discussions and all of the moving parts and the layers, as it's been mentioned around the table, that it really is a cancer, and there are so many moving parts and so many pieces to address all at once. I just want to say that your report is incredibly fulsome. You've hit everything. You've left no stone unturned. So I really, truly thank you for that work.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Quite a sobering presentation and a way to start the day, but I do want to acknowledge everyone who has participated in this project, Councillor Downey as well. I'm sure it's a difficult problem to face, and I'm happy to support the recommendation in the report for the funding for us to deal with this issue. You know, I think all of us who have daughters or granddaughters or and even just children in the system understand what a difficult subject this is to deal with. I know I live in the downtown, and I see the victims of sex trafficking every day. It's very, very sad to see young women in such a poor state of health. So I really look forward to seeing this move forward, and I'm just proud to be part of a region who actually is going to take this issue seriously and deal with it. And if we don't get funding from other levels of government, we will ensure that the programs are in place regardless. So thank you for all of you, and I'm happy to move that, or I'm sure Councillor Downey might want to move it. I'd be happy to second it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Jason. I do have a motion moved by Councillor Downey, seconded by Councillor Miles, that the strategy as outlined in the report of the Commissioner of Human Services titled "A Strategy to Address Human Sex Trafficking in Peel Region" be endorsed, and further that Regional Council advocate to the Provincial Anti-Human Trafficking Coordination Office for additional funding to support this initiative, and further that a copy of the subject report be sent to the Chief Peel Regional Police, Director, Provincial Anti-Human Trafficking Coordination Office, Chief Executive Officer, Peel Children's Aid Society, Director of Education, Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board, Director of Education, Peel District School Board, President Conseil Scolaire Viamonde, Executive Director, Ontario Federation of Independent Schools, Director de l'Éducation Conseil Scolaire Catholique Mon Avenir, and representatives of the Peel Human Traffic Servicing Providers Committee. And this is a recorded vote, please.
Councillor Starr.
It passes unanimous. Thank you very much. 19.2, which is in our in-camera, relates to this. It's a proposed property acquisition in relation to this. Do we need to go into camera for that? We do? Okay. I would suggest then that we continue with the agenda and we'll move into camera at the appropriate time to deal with it. Okay. Yeah. All right. Good stuff. We'll move. Moving along then. Gord Curry, President, and Tony Falcone, Vice President, Unit 4, Local 414, regarding the holiday shopping bylaw. Yes. Councillor Sato?
Sorry, I'm trying to turn my mic on. Mr. Chairman, given the report is a little complex, and I'm not sure that the deputants would pick up exactly from the report what the recommendation is. Would it not be helpful for us to have the presentation first so that they know exactly what we are voting on today before they speak?
If it's the wish of council, we can do that.
I just think it'd be more helpful for them because I think they're going to come up and tell us, don't open up statutory holiday shopping, and that's not what the report is relating to, so.
Yeah. Okay, how does council feel that way? Can I see a show of hands to do the presentation first? Okay, if you kindly take your seats back in the audience and we'll bring forward staff for the presentation. Welcome, Adrian.
So, good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of Regional Council. My name is Adrian Smith, and I'm the Acting Director of Integrated Planning in the Public Works Department here at Peel Region. And I'm very pleased to be here this morning to present the results of our work and our recommendations for regulating retail business holiday shopping in Peel. This work really responds to direction from Council back in June of 2017 to review Peel's approach to retail holiday shopping and exemptions to the holiday shopping requirements. And that follows up on changes that were made to the Provincial Retail Business Holiday Act. As you know, the Retail Business Holiday Act is provincial legislation that was established to provide common retail business pause days, so pausing, on the 9 statutory holidays listed on the slide. Most retail operations are not permitted to open for business activity on these 9 holidays unless exempt either through existing provisions under the Act for essential services or through tourism-related exemptions. That's based on the criteria that are set out in the Provincial Act. Under the Act, regional and single-tier municipalities are the approval authority for tourism exemptions, and in Peel, we've established a regional municipal bylaw that set up a process for Council to consider tourism exemptions and applications for that in accordance with specific criteria that were set out in the Act. The process that was set out in that bylaw has been the basis for considering previous tourism exemptions and applications for that in Peel. At the end of 2016, the province proclaimed Section 1.2 of the Retail Business Holidays Act. And that newly proclaimed section now permits regional and single-tier municipalities to exempt themselves from the requirements of the Retail Business Holiday Act and the tourism exemption criteria in the Act. However, in order to be exempt from the Act, municipalities must establish their own set of regulations in a municipal bylaw regulating holiday closures. Given this new legislative opportunity, regional staff were asked to consider the creation of a retail business holiday shopping bylaw specific for Peel, separate from the Act. Of course, it's important to note that notwithstanding whether retail businesses are regulated through the Act or through municipal bylaw with respect to closures on statutory holidays, the protections guaranteed under the Employment Standards Act, of course, still apply, so things like holiday pay and right to refuse work, and that's applied by the province for all retail establishments and all businesses, including retail establishments. So as part of considering this Peel approach to regulating retail business holidays and closures, we undertook background research, and with the assistance of a consultant, Urban Metrics, we carried out extensive consultation with Peel residents, with retail workers, and with retail business owners. This methodology included an online survey as well as 7 public and stakeholder workshops. So the results of all that research and the consultation are detailed in the staff report that's on today's agenda, as well as in a consultant's report and in a consultation summary. And the consultant's report and the summary are available on the region's webpage. So as expected through this process, it turned out to be a popular topic for stakeholders. We received almost 4,000 responses, and most of which could be grouped into the themes that are up on the slide above. And the results and the feedback ranged across the spectrum of opinion, from either supporting a more wide, open, voluntary approach to allowing retail openings on statutory holidays, to opinions of a much stricter approach, looking at prohibiting most retail businesses from opening on holidays. However, throughout that feedback, there was a strong common thread which underlined the input, recognizing the benefits of a common pause day to individuals, to families, and to the community more broadly. Also, we did not find a compelling push for a change to the status quo. So based on those results, our staff recommendations really focus on balancing the commercial opportunity and the convenience for shoppers against the social benefit of having common pause days and keeping that opportunity for statutory holidays for most workers in our communities. So the staff recommendations today are contained and would be implemented through a draft new retail business holiday shopping bylaw. And that's recommended for approval, and it's on today's agenda as item 18. And in the following few slides, I'll go through some of the specifics of the content of that bylaw and going forward. But essentially, our recommendations can be summarized as retaining a strong emphasis and the value of a common pause day, retaining the essential service and tourism exemptions that exist in the Retail Business Holiday Act, a continuation of the tourism exemptions that have previously been considered and granted by Peel Council, as well as providing a mechanism for tourism area exemptions through a local municipal tourism strategy that would really replace the existing process in the Act that has allowed tourism areas such as the Port Credit Business Improvement Area to be open on some holidays. But it would provide strict criteria based on and tied to the approval of a local tourism strategy in order for businesses to be exempt. So these last 4 slides provide a little bit more detail on the exemptions and implementations that I've mentioned in the bylaw. So the first is the Retail Business Holiday Act and its associated regulations permit essential services and tourism-based businesses to operate on any of the 9 statutory holidays. And you can see them listed on the slide here. It includes things like small stores, pharmacies, gas stations, nurseries, art galleries, tourist establishments. All these exemptions from the Act would remain, with only some very minor adjustments that we've made to the definitions just for ease of interpretation and what have you. In addition, the retail establishments and areas that have already received exemption from Regional Council in the past are proposed to be permitted to continue to operate on statutory holidays. We've also included some transition provisions in the bylaw to fairly recognize the applications that have been submitted for exemption are in process under our existing bylaw, and basically the transition would allow for those applications submitted before May 31st, 2018 to proceed and be considered by Council in accordance with the provisions of the existing bylaw and the Act. And I think there's only one such application in process. Any new tourism exemptions would essentially only have one requirement defined in the bylaw, and that's a stricter requirement in that in order for a retail establishment not covered by the status quo exemptions I mentioned or the grandfathered exemptions to proceed and be open on a statutory holiday, a council-approved local municipal strategy must explicitly delineate the area and state that the area is intended to be exempt from holiday closure requirements in order to meet the tourism vision and goals and requirements that are established by a local tourism strategy. And this component of the bylaw, as I mentioned, is a mechanism for implementing tourism areas similar to Port Credit Business Improvement Area. And these kinds of exemptions for tourism areas are common throughout the GTA in areas like downtown Oakville, Kleinburg, Unionville, those kinds of areas. Implementation of the bylaw would occur through a set fine process under the Provincial Offences Act, similar to enforcement of other regional bylaws. Permitted exemptions would be regulated by the clear and transparent definitions that are provided in the bylaw, and there would not be an exemption application process. Any new exemptions would only be available through a local tourism strategy approved by a local municipality. Staff would also be implementing a communication strategy to ensure that Peel residents, businesses, and retail workers are aware of and can find information about retail holiday shopping requirements in Peel. So in summary, the issue of retail business openings on statutory holidays is not an easy one. It essentially requires balancing the opportunity for increased commerce and convenience for some against the general social good of protecting common pause days. We feel that the recommendations today reflect the results of extensive consultation, as I mentioned, almost 4,000 responses, and the findings of that, which did not clearly identify a demand for additional retail openings on holidays. And the recommendations provide for clarity and consistency in exemptions, and they maintain that important principle that came through the consultations of the benefits of a common pause day. So thank you for the opportunity to present today, and welcome questions.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest that you stick to questions of the staff at this point in fairness to the delegations, and then when they come forward, then we can entertain any motion with respect to that, to this item. Thanks. First, I have Councillor Sato.
Thank you. Two questions. In the process, when you speak of the tourism designated area in this tourism strategy, we're just working on our tourism strategy right now, and we're developing our plan. It'll be 2019. If we designate a tourist area in the city, does it then have to come to the region for approval under this bylaw for that designated area to fit under the Retail Act?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So provided the tourism strategy that was adopted, would be adopted by the local council, was specific in defining an area and specific in identifying that as part of that strategy, you were looking to allow retail shopping on statutory holidays, then the definitions provided in the bylaw would allow for that, would allow for retail businesses within that area to open, and there would not be a need to come back to regional council. But it does, the definition in our proposed bylaw is very clear that it's not just that the area is identified, but that it's specifically identified as part of the tourism strategy to allow for retail opening.
So that information, that criteria then would be sent to our tourism staff at the city and our board as we're moving forward on our strategy.
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely, and we have had discussions with your staff that are working on your tourism strategy.
Right, I
Made them
realize
aware,
that,
yeah.
and they were not clear at all as to what you meant. So that's why I'm asking the question today, because it seemed a bit unclear. So within the municipality then, the local municipality, we do not have to enact a separate bylaw. We would only have to have a council-approved tourism strategy that met this criteria. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And because I'm sticking to questions, Mr. Chairman, and I was going to make a comment to all our wonderful delegates out here, is it correct to say that all of the people who are here today representing the retail workers have nothing to worry about because there is no change and we have no intention of moving forward with individual applications to expand and open on the statutory holidays other than what might occur in a tourist designated area?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. good news. Makes all of us happy, and it should make them happy, too.
That was well put, Councillor Sato. Wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, for a question. Councillor Starr. Councillor Starr.
Yeah, I think it's a very good report also. I'm sorry? I know. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't say that. I retract that. I retract that I said it's a good report.
You can say that.
The question I have is following up on Councillor Sato's. The type of markets, and you had them on a list there, but the type of markets that have generally applied for exemption are those of either cultural or a different type of a market, and I say Asian or they could be others, and these are usually one-offs. And the question I have basically is that if you restrict it totally to a tourist, say tourist area, I'm concerned about the fact that you may have one-off supermarket that maybe doesn't comply because it doesn't fit within the 2.5 kilometers or 3 kilometers. But, you know, tourist destinations are also not put in that fashion or in that those parameters. I mean, you may have to go to Caledon to see the cataract. Is that outside? Don't tell anybody. No. But to me, it's bothersome because then how do you allow that one-off market? And I know I've talked to some of the people here I see, and they had no problem with those sort of things. But it's a little bit of a dilemma, and I'm not sure if we say it's in the bylaw and you can't do this, and it's 5 kilometers, and here, say, a singular type of market was forced to go outside of that because that's the only spot they could go to. And I'm not going to name names, but I can think of a couple, Councillor Sato, up your way. And how do you get within that range, and how do we make it flexible enough so that the rest of the process is fine, you know, but you're going to have these one-offs, and we have to respect the diverse population we have too. So my question is, how do we handle that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's something that we did consider through the process, and part of the feedback that we received is that the current application process was not clear and transparent, and that the criteria were not always sort of easily understood and directly related to the tourism aspects of a proposal. So what we've proposed is that to eliminate the application process. However, that wouldn't preclude a local municipality in sort of looking carefully at the tourism objectives that they have within their municipality, of considering, you know, specific circumstances and including that as part of their strategy, and in which case then that would be permitted by the bylaw.
Okay, so we're not going to have to go back to this at a later date then and say, well, you know what the bylaw says because it's so singular.
No, the bylaw does provide that flexibility that if there is a specific I guess, strategy identified in a local municipal tourism strategy, so identifying a specific area, and as part of that strategy considers retail holiday exemptions, and if that's included and is something that's been approved by a local council, then it would automatically fall into the bylaw, and there would not be a need for a bylaw to come back to regional council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just with respect to that application process, how involved are the actual employees with that application? Is there a survey that the applicant has to do with their employers or employees through that process? And is this something that we look at?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, typically they do a survey, and that is submitted, and it's something that's part of the process for their individual.
And how thorough is that survey? I'm kind of just trying to pull out of you, like, what does it look like? Does it have holes in it? Is it you know, is it? Does it get a good beat? Is it easy to dance to? Does it have a good beat? Yeah.
So that's one of the issues, is that that's not something that's easily verifiable or it's not our core business to be involved in sort of employee surveys of other companies. So that's one of the issues with evaluating these applications is the consistency and transparency of the material that's submitted.
So is it something that I realize it's not our core business and nothing's our core business, but yet everything is. Is there something that we can we help those applicants to help us in terms of trying to get more of that survey or the percentage of the employees heard during that application process?
So with the recommendations today, there would no longer be such an application process. Basically, the definitions that we've provided for in the bylaw would be the exemptions that would be allowed, and there would be no further application process. The only further exemptions would be through that tourism strategy approach. So that would allow for.
So we're no longer going to hear the employees of the company that wants to open up on a holiday.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
Yes, I was looking at the penalty, offense and minimum penalty, and it seems to me a 500 minimum is very low. If I was going to open a store, I'd probably clear more than $500 profit in a day. Do we have to put a minimum? I like the 5,000 penalty much better, but I think the minimum should be much higher. Do we have discretion on that?
So legal staff can answer more than that. I understand we have very limited discretion through this approach. So,
Patrick?
The $500 penalty uses a kind of expedited prosecution process. It's like getting a parking ticket or a traffic ticket. If you use that simplified process, then that would be the penalty under the bylaw, $500. If you wanted to seek more, you can proceed by a more elaborate kind of prosecution and seek a penalty up to the maximum in the bylaw, which is $5,000.
Yeah. So if it's a repeat offender, you would more likely go for a higher penalty.
Yeah, that would be in the discretion of the prosecuting authorities. Ultimately, the provincial offences prosecutor could choose to proceed to seek the higher fine.
Given our courts are pretty clogged, I don't think no babies die when people open a store, so it's going to be just repeatedly $500 fine. And
I think practically speaking, that's logical.
it's pretty soft penalty. Thank you.
Councillor Kovac.
Thank you, and through the chair, Adrian, thank you for your presentation. Just wondering if Regional Council were to support the recommendations, but not point 2, which is the maintaining of previously approved exemptions, so essentially the grandfather clause. The grandfather clause, if we were to retract that, and thus the previously given tourist exemptions, to what extent would that become problematic? Or maybe our solicitor might want to respond to that.
Just on the policy side of that question, so there's a variety of existing permissions that Peel Council has granted, and it ranges from some long-standing and difficult decisions that previous councils have made around the statutory holiday shopping at Mississauga City Centre, Bramalea Centre, City Centre, and as well as individual stores, specialty stores, typically those more culturally focused food stores, specialty food stores. So I think in terms of eliminating the grandfathering for some of those one-off specialty food stores, I'm sure there would be big implications for the owners and the patrons of those individual stores, but it would be within that scope. I think if you change your decisions, or if you eliminated the grandfathering for some of the more major facilities, the big malls, Mississauga Chinese Centre, then that would have broader ramifications in, of course, the number of stores, the number of patrons, and also the one of the things that we discuss in the report is providing for that kind of balance of opportunity for commercial expression, I guess, on statutory holidays, and at least providing some opportunity for residents to have that shopping experience on a statutory holiday. So you'd be sort of eliminating that from within the region. Probably not going to be eliminated throughout the GTA, so folks would probably just go outside of our boundaries.
I guess my concern had been, and this goes back more than a year ago, that rather than one-offs, they would become eventually many-offs, and that's essentially what we had seen with, I believe it was Yanming, and then TNT before that, and PAT after that. So now we're in a situation where there are retailers that, and it's that argument, providing service to X ethnic community is somehow worthy of being given a tourism exemption, is I think a bit shoddy. But now we're in this situation where it's a bit awkward. But thank you for the report. No further comments.
Thank you. Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to thank staff. This is one of those reports that you really balance metrics, but you also really listened through the consultation process. And oftentimes when you go through a policy process such as this and you're reviewing bylaws, there's that frustration out there from folks that, you're consulting me, but, really what's going to be the impact. And I think this report really speaks to the values of this region and really speaks to a balanced approach. But I think when you talk about the quality of life in which we want to promote here in the city, here in the region. So I really thank staff for this report. It was really good research, excellent, and I thank you very much for everything that you did. And I'm not sure if anyone moved the recommendations. I'd be more than happy to move the recommendations.
Actually, I'm not going to take any recommendations until we hear, out of respect for the delegates. Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
I'd like to follow up on Councillor Kobach, who hit the same question I had as I was reading this report. And I'd like to know what the legal ramifications would be for us to not grandfather automatically. That in fact what you're suggesting is the big ones like Square One and Port Credit will automatically qualify under our new system. The little tiny grocery stores that had very fancy guys doing presentations for them, and we all just gave in, or I did. As a matter of fact, I voted against the last one. But what are the legal ramifications? If we say it's a new slate, you've got to reapply through the new rules. The ones that truly qualify will get through easily. Can we be sued for not grandfathering, Patrick?
We could be sued, but not successfully, in my opinion.
I love your answers, Patrick. Okay, when it comes time to vote on this, I'd like to separate that out.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would just note that there may be a timing issue in terms of, as you mentioned, if there was a move to allow for some of the larger operations to be to have the exemption, then that would need to be incorporated into the local tourism strategy in order to comply with our bylaw. So it may take some time for the local municipalities to be able to get to that. And I guess we have some statutory holidays coming up over the summer, which may create a disconnect.
Just to pick up on Councillor Parrish's question, and this is through you to Patrick. Patrick, would we not have to repeal the bylaws that were approved by council with respect to those applications?
Yes, if we were proceeding in that way, that's what we would do. If that was the approach that was to be taken, you would want to repeal those bylaws.
The process then would be, if they weren't under this new bylaw, we'd have to repeal those bylaws.
If you didn't have the grandfathering provision,
Yeah.
you'd have something of a conflict between this bylaw, which provides for general closing subject to permitted exemptions, and a conflict between that and the existing bylaws, which purport to permit opening. So you would want to clean that up if you were taking that approach.
Okay. Would it be possible then, if it was the wish of council, that if you approved the grandfathering now, then you could go through a process of eliminating them down the road?
Yes, a decision to grandfather now is not for all time as a matter of law.
Okay, just trying to get some clarity on it. Okay, Councillor Raz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess question to either Patrick or Adrian. Can you put a date in, like a sunset clause within, or amend, I guess you would have to amend the other bylaws to put in a sunset clause in those bylaws. Acknowledge in this bylaw that they're grandfathered until a certain date, so perhaps a year from now. Is that a possibility?
Yes, you could amend the existing exemption bylaws and provide in this bylaw for a kind of transitional sunsetting type of arrangement. We would have to go back and revise the bylaw fairly extensively for that purpose.
Perhaps, I guess, we can leave that with you. I don't think we need to work out those details today. Maybe we can refer that back to staff to come to look at the grandfathering / sunset options. But we want to see what the delegates say is first.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the delegation and the reports that came before us and the presentation. My concern is if we do anything right now, the municipalities and the people who have been grandfathered, their voices aren't here either. So I think responsibly, we need to not just send this back to staff, but make sure that staff get in touch with the appropriate municipalities to make them aware and give everybody a heads up, because to do something, I was going to fully support what came forward today, but then I've got concern now with what I'm hearing around the table. And I think it would be unfair to be grandfathered in and then not be part of the voice here at council. So I think it requires a more in-depth dialogue. So is that possible, to make sure that the municipalities understand what's coming down and go back and have further discussions?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of the grandfathering that I mentioned in the presentation, and that's included in the proposed bylaw, there has been consultation on that. That's been published. We did send a notice out to everybody on our consultation list, letting them know of the staff report, and so that's been clear that in terms of the staff recommendation of the grandfathering. If that were to change, then that would be something that that there would not have been consultation on.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. I'm going to call on the delegations now. Our first is Gord Curry, President, and Tony Falcone, Vice President, Unifor Local 414. Welcome, gentlemen.
Morning.
And just to remind you that we have a 5-minute rule out here.
Okay, I'll try and be quick. Good morning, everyone, councillors, Mr. Chair, city staff. My name is Gord Curry. I'm the president of Local 414. Sitting beside me is Tony Falcone, the vice president. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Our local represents about 12,000 workers, mostly in the retail and service sectors all across eastern and southern Ontario. Our members work in retail supermarkets, pharmacies, as well as the food service, warehousing, and other service-related industries. Approximately 1,500 of our members work in the Peel region, including under the Metro and Loblaws family. If changes are made that allow retail stores to open 365 days a year, it could affect over 60,000 retail workers in Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon. Estimates are that retail workers are 80 to 90% part-time with no consistent schedules. Retail workers work a 7-day work week, which can include rotating shifts on days, evenings, Saturdays, Sundays. Some retail workers work 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. Currently in Peel region, like other municipalities, there are clear rules governing which business can operate on the 9 recognized statutory holidays in Ontario, such as Labor Day, Victoria Day, Canada Day. As a result of the Provincial Retail Business Holiday Act, on December 31st, 2016, however, the province included a section of the act which allowed municipalities and regions to determine their own rules around holiday shopping. While we are pleased that the City of Toronto decided to maintain the standard in the Retail Business Holiday Act, keeping stores with a few exceptions closed on the holidays. Other regions like York decided to allow stores to remain open at their own discretion. York Region's approach was hugely disappointing. It was unlike how other cities like Toronto have approached this matter, including months-long public consultations with labor unions, business associations, and other interested stakeholders. Statutory holidays are dedicated days of rest that should be enjoyed by as many workers as possible in the Peel region. Part-time, precarious retail workers, often with no set schedules and an insecure work environment, it's not an exaggeration to say that statutory holidays provide the only real guarantee of time off job for retail workers. Anyone who argues that retail workers will have a choice to work on a stat holiday has clearly never worked in that sector. They also have a very naive view of employment standards compliance. Workers will be taken advantage of with these holiday shopping rule changes. Most workers simply won't ask for the time, often fear reprisal, including seeing their work hours cut in future, and that's not fair. Not only do I think workers should have the right to rest and recharge on holidays, but I also worry that the rights of workers to fair pay and scheduling on holidays won't be properly enforced. Research in 2015 shows that public holiday infractions were among the top 5 most commonly reported in Ontario. During a special precarious work employment blitz, nearly 1/4 of the violations involved holiday pay and scheduling. Just because there are laws on the books to protect workers doesn't mean the laws are enforced. Further extending these bylaws exemptions without a push for greater enforcement of the law would only leave the vulnerable workers more vulnerable. Staff have noted that a number of businesses felt that allowing certain business to open gave others an unfair competitive advantage. We acknowledge this dilemma that Peel Region is in. However, we do not feel that allowing all business to open in a proper public policy response. Peel Region should look towards making its limitations on the definition of tourism rather than allowing all business to open. Additionally, city staff suggests that because of the rise in e-commerce and supermarket competition, that somehow it should allow stores to open 365 days per year. This is completely ridiculous and has nothing to do with the matter at hand. I'll tell you what matters, that a single mom might have to leave her kids with a babysitter on Christmas morning because she has to work a 5-hour shift, or that a young worker has to cancel their plans to visit a friend or loved one on a long weekend because they're being told to work a night shift, or that minimum wage worker might have to pay cash for a taxi to get to work because there's no other transit available. The overwhelming consensus from communities, including workers and business owners, and the equivalent of what we're asking. You ensure that retail workers secure the break and the holidays they deserve, that many others take for granted by retaining existing practice of closing stores during the holidays. I thank you for your time and let me speak.
And you made it under the wire.
Thank you.
Well done.
We have a petition. Just one thing, we have a petition with approximately 2,000 names signed by retail workers and residents in Peel.
Okay, if you could, yeah, we'll take that for the record. If you could submit it to the clerk will come around. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Our next delegation then is Louis Ursu, retail worker. And again, I'll just remind you the 5-minute rule. See if you can beat these gentlemen.
My name is Louis Ursu. I'd like to thank you for allowing us to speak today. I'm here as a member of Unifor and see myself as a senior representative to this fine group of delegates we have behind us tonight. I've been in retail for 47 years now, last 20 being in the Peel region. And I don't like the way things are going. I'm old school, and I used to have Sundays, used to spend family time together with people and that. They've taken Sundays away, not necessarily for myself, but for others. Sunday used to be our family day, and if we didn't go to our families, we went to our close friends, and all of a sudden our close friends became our family. I got many aunts and uncles now that were really not related, okay? And to this day, the same thing happens. We like to spend time with other people, and my children see other close friends as aunts and uncles and cousins. Family time is very, very important to me. Obviously, it's not going to be affecting me as much because, again, I'm a senior representative, but I'm here to hopefully pay it forward, to represent all the workers that are coming up behind us. I don't see the direction as being well, although I feel very positive about what was spoken today here in the chambers. I think that it's not just about one person, it's about the business, okay? And old school, like I said, I remember when retail was Monday to Wednesday till 6 o'clock, and Saturday till 6, no Sunday openings, Thursday and Friday maybe till 9 or 10. People found the time to shop. You know, you didn't need to have these other days or all these times. We've done 24 hours now. We've done Sunday openings. At one time was a bonus. It was time and a half. Then they've taken that away. It's just a regular day now for new employees, and that's a shame. I'm hoping that they couldn't do that just at holidays, but who knows, down the road. Wouldn't like to see it. I heard Gord say earlier about, you know, not always just about family, but it's also about me time. As a senior person working in, I need some downtime. I need to charge the batteries. I need to, you know, have some time for myself. And if it takes, you know, this taking stat holidays away, you're going to take it somewhere else. And I'm afraid that people will be not showing up for work or not doing this or not doing that because they don't have that time, and they'll be taking time. And I don't like to see that because I figure you're there to work, you get paid to work, you do your work, and that's it. But I think people would be taking advantage of the situation, and I'd hate to see that. I also like to reiterate that in family time, a lot of times on a stat holiday, you'll get children that'll come from out of town that are college to go to grandma's house, go to aunts and uncles and everything like that. And that's the only time that maybe baby brother and sister can get together or something like that. And it would be a shame for if sister came home from college and then baby brother had to go work for his 5-hour shift at the grocery store before she hopped back on the train or bus and go back to college. As a young person, I grew up around the family situation, but later on in life, my parents split. And I look forward to the Sundays when there was a time that they actually got together, whether it be to drop me off or to pick me up or whatever, and they got along for my sake. So it was a family day for me, even though they weren't together anymore. And it was good because they got along very well considering. I think that growing up in a situation where you're around your family and everything like that's a lot different than nowadays. It seems that people don't spend enough time. Like, I don't know how many people sit down at a dinner table and actually talk to their children or talk to their children without their phones in their hands. It's nice to touch base. It's nice to have that time, whether it be once a week, twice a week, on weekends, or just on stat holiday. You know, that would be nice. There's a lot of times that I think with the openings that we have right now that people will find time to do this. I mean, people aren't going to do their shop. If they know that store is closed, they're not going to wait to the last minute. They're going to get the shopping. They're not going to go Christmas Day to pick up a bottle of ketchup. I don't even think the stores want to be open. I think to turn on the lights and to pay the wages at time and a half, it doesn't seem logical to me. So why this is a big concern, I don't know. I just like to say status quo, let it go, let's leave it. I'm going to be most definitely busy on one of these holidays, and I won't be going to work. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and just say no. Appreciate it.
Merry Christmas. Well done. Thank you. Councillor Sato. Oh, he disappeared.
Yeah, I know. I did have a question to him, but no, that's okay. Just a very, very quick question, Santa Claus. So I assume that you and the other,
Louis, come on back to the podium.
yeah, come on down here,
please.
sorry.
Put your hat back on.
Just for you.
Okay, thank you.
I guess the rest of them, the T-shirts are your elves, are they?
I just want to confirm that you and the other deputants that are here today are supportive of the recommendation that we are dealing with this morning, which is that we are not extending, we're not getting rid of the statutory holiday, and we are looking at potentially tourist designations, but that hasn't been done today.
That's why I said it's status quo, like, if the way
You
things
like
are
the
right now,
report.
quite happy.
So you're happy with the report and the
Absolutely. I
recommendation?
felt very positive listening to people earlier today.
Good, thank you. Just wanted to get that confirmed.
Super.
And you're a good Santa, that's good.
Who says I'm not?
Jason Parks, retail worker. Come on down. Welcome, Jason.
Good morning. I have to apologize, I forgot my speech on the bus, so I kind of scribbled out a few points here as I go, so please bear with me. My name is Jason Parks. I'd like to say that I am against stat holiday openings of the stores. I'm pleased to hear everybody's on board here. I've got two reasons, one professional, one personal. Professional side, I am a grocery manager at Metro Store 717 in Mississauga. Lou is one of my staff. He works very hard, and finding time to schedule staff on a regular day, let alone a stat holiday, would, pull my hair out. Thank God I got short hair. And the personal position on it, my wife works overnight. I work during the day. We have very little time together. And we look forward to our stat holidays so we can plan stuff, go away, do whatever. And working all the time, it's hard to find time, as everybody has said, to get with family, friends. And I just hope, as I'm hearing, I'm glad to hear it, that it's going to stay the way it is. So I thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Jim McDowell, Unifor Local 1285, Union in Politics Co-Chair and past President, Peel Region Labor Council.
First, I would like to say thank you. First, I would like to say thank you so much for the hard work that has gone into this. I did participate in quite a few of the public consultations, and to be quite honest with you, I think the way that it was structured, any municipality, any region which is thinking about pursuing this should use your process as a model for continuing on. It was very, very well done. We were given as much time as needed for the consultations, and I think it was very, very well done. And thank you for that. Interesting, what's been going on, not just in Peel Region, but what's been happening right across the province. And it's, for myself, it's a bit of a wake-up call, because in some ways, it's actually very, very disheartening to think that families and some of the most important times that I can remember as a child could be a thing of the past. Statutory holidays, we all of us in this room all looked forward to those as a child and as an adult with their children. And to think that that might be removed and our children not being able to enjoy those times with their children is very, very disheartening. So I am very pleased to hear that, and I am in favor of the report that we no longer move forward on this. But also as a worker, it's our aspect, obviously, that it would be very harming to families. But also, I was in Europe at the beginning of the month, and I was talking to some retail owners and workers in Ireland. And when I was telling them about the possibility of this happening in Peel Region, they were shocked, because their stores normally open at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they're closed by 5 during the regular work week, and they're only open out for a couple of hours on a Saturday. So they have time to have a meal with their loved ones. And to actually think that that would be removed and that their business would be overshadowing their family life, they were horrified by it. But this is something which has now become the reality that we're all dealing with in Peel Region, especially with retail workers. So it's something that's, I mean, this is not the first time that this question has been posed to this council. And it's, like I said, it is very disheartening that we are having a choice made between family and our work lives. And sadly, our work lives are winning over in a lot of times with the time that we spend with our family. But I am very encouraged with the decision that the report has made, and I just wish to thank everyone, and especially everyone that was involved with the process. Thank you.
Just before you leave, I was just going to ask, some councillors made mention of the grandfathering clause, and I just wondered if you had a comment with respect to that at all.
As many of the people who have given depositions today, we don't have a problem with what's actually currently happening right now. That's not the issue. So grandfathering in, I don't think would be an issue for us as workers, because we know exactly what we're going to be dealing with. But if we were going to be moving into a position where we would be removing the majority of statutory holidays and having only one day off for the entire year, I think the amount of pressure that would put on families, and not just workers in the retail business, but also families in general in the region, would be very, very disheartening. But thank you, yes.
I appreciate your comments.
Great,
Thank you.
well, thank you.
Brings us to David Wojcik, President and Chief Executive Officer, Mississauga Board of Trade. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't know we were having props this morning, but I'm glad to see Santa here. That was a nice treat. Mr. Chair, members of council, I'm here today on behalf of the Mississauga Board of Trade to discuss the staff recommendations on the new bylaw to implement the Retail Business Holidays Act. On the outset, I would like to compliment the staff on the excellent work that they did and the outreach that they conducted during this public review and their interest in consulting with Mississauga Board of Trade on this issue. For a very long time, we have grown accustomed to statutory holidays as days when many businesses are not permitted to be open. Generally, in the past, this has been public policy and an area controlled by the province of Ontario. Recently, the province has devolved this issue to municipal governments to determine which days of business may be open or closed. As of January this year, you know, you now have the authority to set your own rules in the region of Peel. Our neighboring, many times, council will ask, so who else is doing this? So we would like to let you know the region of York has already passed a bylaw to remain open for all days with the exception of Christmas Day. Our concern is that businesses here in the region of Peel will lose money because of an exodus to other jurisdictions to do their shopping. Further, as time goes on, the definition of what constitutes a tourism exemption has become a loophole for certain businesses to argue they should be open on these statutory holidays while their competitors must remain closed. We at the Mississauga Board of Trade are concerned that tourism definition is being taken advantage of and are forcing your staff to grant exemptions that should not happen. The City of Mississauga is moving forward with its tourism master plan and has recently implemented a municipal accommodation tax to assist in funding tourism initiatives. While we are supportive of this endeavor, we feel that playing the tourism exemption game going forward just won't work. I would ask that if you do support Councillor Shaughnessy's motion to look at the grandfathering clause, that you do send this report back to council so that stakeholders could have further consultation on this, as this was not part of the original consultation. I would also like to further point out that all councillors have expressed a concern for youth employment. In general terms, it is these very young workers who depend on the money they earn when working on holidays that are in question today. Please let our youth know you care about their ability to earn that income. The Mississauga Board of Trade recommends that the Region Appeal does adopt the York Region bylaw to allow these business openings. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, David. Patrick, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 points of clarification. There is some wording in the PowerPoint presentation that's a little bit ambiguous, and I just wanted to clarify that under the staff proposal going forward, the tourism criteria that you're familiar with from the past, the within 2 kilometers of a tourism exemption, those would be by the wayside. They would not be moving forward. What would happen is, as Adrian described, you would bring an application on a tourism basis to the local council, and the local council would consider whether it's aligned with the local council's tourism strategy, and provided that the local council very specifically designates geographically what area it's prepared to see an exemption in, those would be the criteria. It would be at the discretion of the local council. The former criteria that had difficulties associated with them will not be mandatory going forward. The other thing is, I was asked earlier about the possibility of litigation, and I would echo the delegation's suggestion that you would want to consult further if the grandfathering, removal of grandfathering was to be considered. That, just from a lawyer's perspective, that would be good advice.
Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you for your deputation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And one further note, I am happy that Santa Claus will be working on Christmas this year.
Okay, our next delegation then is Joanne Reese, CSR Retail Employee. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you all for allowing me to speak today. I really appreciate, Councillor Sato, you asking that we read out loud exactly what we are going to be discussing today, because that did clarify some things for me, and I appreciate that. I have a question, though. I'm not going to read what I prepared, because I, too, as a retail employee, do not want to be working on statutory holidays, and my same sentiments are exact, because I have family, it's my family time. But I just wanted clarity on when you were saying that if a designated tourist area no longer has to go through the process of application for becoming, for opening on statutory holidays, what about the businesses that were, well, let's take Square One, for example. So Square One is already designated as a retail tourist exemption during statutory holidays. There are some businesses within that location that do not open on statutory holidays. So my question is, going forward, if you are a major retailer already within there where you do not open, but now things have changed in the sense that you don't have to apply to get the exemption, will they be allowed to do that? And I don't know if they will be required to survey their employees. Is that clear where my confusion lies and my concern is?
Patrick, could you clarify that, please?
Nothing in the bylaw would compel any business to open, even if it were within a tourism designated area. Those kinds of issues can arise under leases between landlords and tenants. We don't purport to deal with that. We aren't compelling anybody to open. And sorry, the second part was about surveying.
The employees, yes. If, like, I will give an example. Within the Square One area right now, the LCBOs are closed on statutory holidays. So now, if the change comes where the LCBO decides they would like to open on statutory holidays, they no longer have to go through any kind of approval from the council. They can just open, and would they survey their employees? This is where I'm concerned.
I can't speak to the LCBO
I know you
example in
can't, I'm
particular,
just
but
curious.
the general answer would be that whether to require a surveying of employees to take place would be something that the local council would have to decide as part of its process of considering requests for tourism designation. Our bylaw would not require that or prevent it.
So they can turn around at this point and say if they wanted to, they have the ability to open, even though they haven't in the past. So there's nothing can stop them as a retailer from saying, yes, I would like to open now that we don't have to go through that second application.
No, they would need to either rely on an existing exemption,
Okay,
which is the status quo brought
Right.
forward, or they would need to go to the local council and make a case for alignment with the local tourist strategy.
okay. That's what I need to know, because I wasn't sure if they could just decide. Thank you very much for answering that question for me.
You've got 1 minute left.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you, and as you know, I do appreciate my statutory holidays remaining closed, and I am quite happy to hear that that seems to be where we're going with this, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
If you just stay in place, I do have a counselor on the board here. Counselor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think I was satisfied with the answer. I don't think it fulfilled the question that you proposed. I think LCBO is not the right example, but I think that what I need to know, Patrick, is if any kind of retail shop in, let's say, Square One, because that was used as an example, just the owners decided to open. Right now, they do not have to go anywhere to have that, to be granted the opening of their retail shop. We don't, it is no longer in our authority, and nor is it in the municipalities, the local municipalities' authority, because they're under the kind of that Square One umbrella, where there's other stores that are open, so they have every right to open. And we do not, nor does the local municipality, stipulate that they have to survey their employees. They can choose to open regardless of whether the employees want to work or not, correct?
Sorry, in the case of a retailer within Square One, which enjoys an existing tourism exemption, that exemption for Square One as a whole is grandfathered, and so they could rely on that and open without any further permission from the region or the local municipality.
Right. And just a question to you, and it's a hard question to answer, and you don't have to answer it. Think about it for a second. Your current employer, if they were to ask you to work on a holiday and you said no, do you think that your job would be in jeopardy?
My job wouldn't be in jeopardy, but the amount of, because I am part-time, the amount of hours given, because even though there should be you should be able to express your rights, there's always backlash to that.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Counselor Parrish.
Yeah, I'm still kind of hung up on the sunset clause, so I'm going to ask everybody that comes forward from now on. If we sunset the ones that are proposed to be grandfathered and reevaluate them, do you have a problem with that, or do you think we shouldn't bother?
I don't have a problem with it.
So you don't have a problem with our doing a reevaluation, or you don't have a problem with them remaining?
No, I think you should do a reevaluation, personally, yes.
And that
yes.
we'd have a consistent policy through the whole region.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, I'm going to ask everyone. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our last delegate is Kathleen Matthews, retail worker. And we just kind of remind you that you have 5 minutes.
One page.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Kathleen. I have worked retail for 20 years. My hours are anywhere from 6 a.m. till 10:30 at night. I am here today to speak on behalf of myself and my colleagues about why we feel we deserve to keep our statutory holidays. It is my understanding that working these holidays would be on a volunteer basis, just like Sundays were 28 years ago when they were first introduced. Now Sundays are just regular days with regular pay. Our store is open on Canada Day this year and will be closed on Monday, July 2nd. What is July 2nd other than a Monday? There are no celebrations or fireworks for our Canada Day substitute. We have been told that if there aren't enough volunteers to work Canada Day, then the company can force us to work. So much for volunteering. My employer posts the schedule 6 days before the statutory holidays, so we will not know if we are being forced to work the statutory holidays until 6 days before. How is that, any of this fair? If this bylaw is passed for only the retail sector, where do our children go when daycares and other child-minding services are closed? My husband, myself, and my daughter all work retail. Where do I send my special needs child on Christmas morning? On these days, memories and traditions are created for our families that may remain with our children for years to come. If we are unable to spend time with our children to teach them morals, values, and traditions, what kind of society are we going to have in the future? We as a country have worked hard to earn these holidays and celebrate with the rest of the country. I understand that life gets busy and unfortunately the time to rest is limited. Please don't take these days away from us. These are guaranteed days that we can spend with our families to just pause and breathe and enjoy. Out of 365 days, we believe that keeping our 9 statutory holidays are not too much to ask for. In closing, I would like to ask one question. Why is my time with my family not as precious and valuable as anyone else's? Thank you for taking the time to listen.
And if you just stay, if you'd stay in place, I have a couple of councillors that want to ask a question. Councillor Starr.
Yeah, the only question I have is, I think it's been made clear, is that the report, the way it is, you don't have any problem with exemptions to singular ethnic markets and that sort of thing.
I do and I don't. If the employees are okay with it, I don't have a problem with it. But I'm worried about the family values being taken away when these stores are opened, if that makes any sense. I understand that, actually, across the board, I would think that all stores should be closed. That's my opinion. I don't shop on holidays. I don't go to Square One. I don't go to any of them. These are my time with my family. Some people are okay with them being open. Employees don't have a problem with working the statutory holidays. I just want to make sure that they're not being forced to work the statutory holidays. There is no repercussions for not working it.
Yeah, I bring that up specifically because a number of us have ethnic markets that fall into that category. And I've done the same thing, by the way. I've actually asked them, and in 2 of the markets, I was actually at their picnics and whatever,
Yep.
and I asked them directly the same question, and there doesn't seem to be a problem. So I just think that we have exemptions in place for a specific reason.
Yep.
And, culturally, they're different, but I certainly I see the position that this group's in, and as I said before, I support the report the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
And I'm going to word my question a little differently.
Sure.
If we were to review all the ones that currently have an exemption and put in a sunset clause at the end of a year, and under the reevaluation, take some of those out, would you have any problem with that?
If you did a sunset clause?
Yep.
No, I would not have a problem. If they're given a time limit of, they have to be closed, their 9 statutory holidays by 6 months, a year from now, I don't have a problem with that.
And you would also understand some of them, when they undergo our tourism evaluation,
Yep.
would still be on
Yes.
exempt.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
I think Councillor Parrish added what I was going to ask you in the end, because you said you believe that all stores should be closed.
Yes.
But then I just heard an exclusion of tourism, so now that doesn't mean all stores stay closed.
Yes. If I had my way, all stores would be closed. They wouldn't be open Sundays, and they would close at 6 o'clock on Saturdays. But
So-
that is not a reality.
So you wouldn't have Niagara-on-the-Lake open, you wouldn't have Kleinberg open, you wouldn't have
No.
any of those tourism-type areas open?
No.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just before we bring the report forward, I just want to congratulate all of those that are here today that made their presentations. I think you're very respectful of council and did it in a very professional manner. And I also want to thank those that made presentations in previous council meetings, because I know this is a very emotional and important issue that we're dealing with. But I just wanted, on behalf of council, to thank you for conducting yourselves in such a professional manner as you have today. We'll bring the report forward. I believe Councillor Medeiros, you moved the motion, and Councillor Starr second the motion. Any comments or questions or changes? We'll put it up on the screen. Give you a little moment to read. Councillor Parrish.
I have a question. The idea of grandfathering the businesses that are already in isn't referred to in this. If we pass this as is that grandfathering automatic because it's part of the report?
Yes.
Well, they're existing bylaws, so they'd be exempt from this.
So how would I, if I wanted to, put in a request for a review of those under the conditions that we're going to be reviewing all new applications, and put in a sunset clause of 12 months?
I would suggest that it be a direction to staff, or put it in a motion to come back with a further report to deal with that.
Okay. Can I do that?
Yes, you may.
Then I just did.
Should we add it to this?
They want to look at all the bylaws.
So we'll take that as a separate motion?
Please.
Yeah, we're going to take that as a separate motion. And you have a seconder, Councillor Parrish? Councillor Kovac, okay. Any further discussion on the motion that's before us? We'll take that as read and a recorded vote, please. That passes. So the motion is passed. Now, the second motion then, Councillor Parrish, and seconded by Councillor Kovac, would be to have a report come back to deal with the... Right. Okay, to look at the grandfathering and the sunset clause. All right, and that'll be a recorded vote as well on that. And that passes. All right. And then if I could have a motion of receipt of all the delegations moved by Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Starr. All in favor? Carried. Yeah, I'm trying to find it. David Wojcik? Yeah. We have another delegation to bring back David Wojcik, President and Chief Executive Officer, Mississauga Board of Trade, regarding the vacant unit property tax rebate program related to item 14.3. David, before you present me, we'll just give them a minute to clear the chambers. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might as well get my own parking spot.
Okay, David, you can proceed. And just to remind you, the 5-minute rule.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council. I appear before you today on behalf of the Mississauga Board of Trade, and in particular our members who own and operate commercial and industrial properties in Peel Region. Due to our interventions last year, you directed your staff to report back to you in today's report on the vacant unit property tax rebate program and the recommendations to phase this out in 2020. Further, we met with your staff, convened a meeting of stakeholders, and submitted a policy brief to the region on this issue. We see that today's information report continues to recommend that the region phase out this important property tax rebate program. For just a little background, the program was created in the late 1990s because of a significant change in the property tax system for commercial and industrial properties, when the business occupancy tax was eliminated with the introduction of the current value assessment system. This meant that properties that were occupied at that time paid an extra tax to the municipality because the unit was leased and paid rental income. With the elimination of the business occupancy tax, full commercial taxes were then paid on buildings whether it was occupied or not. To compensate for this change and provide some fairness and relief to commercial and industrial properties, the vacant unit property tax rebate program was established. The Region of Peel has had this program for decades, and it has worked well for both the region and area municipalities as well as property owners. When the province changed the legislation last year, it allowed municipalities to phase out the program. It did not say you must eliminate the program. The property tax rebate on units vacant for greater than 90 days meeting very specific criteria has been a well-administered program. Owners understand the rules, and your staff do a very, very good job processing these applications. In this, it is the position of the Mississauga Board of Trade that the program be maintained and continue to provide a rebate of up to 20% of the taxes for applications that qualify. In the staff report, we note the cost of the rebates to be around $8 million. That's just in this past year. This compared to the hundreds of millions of dollars paid in commercial and industrial property taxes seems to be a low number. The program allows owners to recover a small part of the taxes paid when they encounter chronic vacancy issues. What the report does not inform council about is the litany of property tax assessment appeals that will be made at MPAC when this program is eliminated. Rather than deal with the applications for rebates on an annual basis and rebate the money in that tax year, we suspect the region will be subject to many hundreds of assessment appeals, which will, when completed, will require the region and area municipalities to rebate hundreds of millions of dollars retroactively in the years to come. Furthermore, in our meetings with staff, we have recommended that staff study the economic impact of eliminating the rebate and compare this to the potential reassessments from MPAC. Only then can this council make an informed decision based on both sides of the economic equation. Frankly, this council is only seeing the savings and not the cost. Mr. Chair and members of council, there has been quite a bit of false rhetoric around this issue. Property owners do not keep buildings vacant so they can get a small rebate on their taxes. They do not sit on vacancies waiting for the highest increases in value. And if they do that, they do not qualify for this rebate. The property must be promoted and available for rent, and they certainly don't cause bankruptcies like Targets and Sears of the world to take place. It is our submission that the vacant unit property tax rebate provides a small bit of tax fairness to the commercial and industrial property sector at times when they incur vacancies beyond their control, while they endeavor to remarket their properties to new tenants. We would ask that you direct your staff to work with us and others to maintain a program with the right rules and objectives going forward, and that council continue the program in its current form until a proper detailed financial analysis can be brought to council for a decision. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. If you just stay in place, I have Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks for coming today, David. I'm not too sure you're going to get enough support today to overturn the decision that council made. I do want to ask you the question, which is, I understand that the Ontario Chamber of Commerce supported the elimination of the rebate, and I'm just wondering what was the basis for that support versus MBOT?
It doesn't happen very often, Councillor, through the chair. It doesn't happen very often, but we represent the businesses of Mississauga and not necessarily that of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. We have a sector in Mississauga that is extremely invested in this particular sector, and while other chambers across the province may not. So that is why it's not common, but it does happen where we break with the Ontario Chamber.
Okay. And I would like to see, and if you could provide input on what types of metrics we can be looking at to see what type of impact this is going to be having over the longer term. I'm happy to revisit this issue at any time. So perhaps you can touch base with staff to determine that. And I'm just going to leave you with an anecdote, which is there was a restaurant in my ward that did renovations, opened for a week, closed its doors, and then for the next few months argued with city staff that it deserved the vacant rebate, but it was a failed business model, and they didn't meet any of the criteria, but they were attempting to use that, and they were not successful, because I drove by it 3 times a day, and I knew that they were open. So they were certainly not vacant.
And thank you for that, Counselor. And through the chair, we have no problem with staff denying applications for this if they do not believe that it is a bogus application. We have no issue with that, but we do want to protect the rebate program for the businesses that do legitimately have an issue with re-renting.
Okay, thank you very much, David.
Thank you. Councillor Starr.
Yeah, just to be clear, David, so the rebate program, a bunch of criteria, but it doesn't really start until 90 days after?
Correct.
And so, but during that period of time, to qualify, they'd have to be actively trying to market or lease or whatever?
That's correct.
I have to agree with you. I don't know of any building owner that's in this as a business that wants to keep a building open to get a 10 or 20% rebate. How can you pay a mortgage on a small rebate, which a building is probably mortgaged at half its value? And I have some empathy for what you're trying to do, and frankly, I think that your argument's a good one, and if it's not working and if it's not mandatory that we do this at this time, I'd like to see some more data and information working with staff, and I'm not sure to suggest a deferral for a year on this program or to take a second look at it. Personally, I having seen a lot of businesses close and 2 targets in my area, and yes, both of them actively working. Fortunately, one of them got a tenant in a year and a half, but what do you do with 80 or 90,000 square feet that was designed for a specific purpose?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair, this is what we're asking, is that we understand what the economic impact is to the region and to the cities involved, and we're asking that you do send this back to staff so we can do further studies on it. We've also made a recommendation to put a cap on the rebate program, if that would satisfy council, a cap of 2 years. Which would allow a business that has this chronic issue to release the property. A Target and a Sears, you don't release in 30 days. It takes months and months and sometimes years to get that kind of tenant back in.
Well, it's been a whole litany of, if you take a look at the history, there's been the Kmart's, there's been the Hudson Bays, there have been others that have come and gone, and unfortunately, these are not, they don't buy property, they lease property. And so there's a whole new sector that during that period of time trying to release, there is impact, severe impact, especially if it's a one-off building. And some of these places were built for those that way. So, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure how to do this, but I'd like to recommend that we have a deferral of this report and to work with staff.
The report's for information only.
Okay.
We've dealt with it. The only suggestion I can make is have staff continue to monitor it and possibly bring back something in 2019, like for the budget process.
Somehow to at least work with MBOT and.
But we've dealt with it. Not to say that they can't relook at it in the future. But this report before us today is for receipt only. It's for information.
Well, how do we change that?
Well, we'd have to, yeah, if you're going to reopen it, you need 2/3 vote to reopen it.
I see, okay. Let me think about it. Let Councillor Gibson take a shot at it.
All right, Councillor Gibson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions of the applicant and a question of Stephen. Is that okay? The Mississauga Board of Trade, how many businesses do you represent?
We represent about 1,000 businesses with 60,000 employees.
How many businesses is there in Mississauga? I'm looking for the percentage of businesses.
How many businesses are in Mississauga?
Yeah.
98% of them.
You represent 98% of all businesses in Mississauga?
Oh, no, sorry. I thought you meant how many businesses, how many of the 1,000 businesses are in Mississauga? We represent 1,000 businesses of, that really depends on what number you're looking at. The latest number that Mayor Crombie noted was 80,000 businesses, but that does include the retail sector and home-based businesses.
Okay. I'm looking for, basically to compare to the Ontario Chamber. Do you know that number?
The number of
Businesses
chambers
they would represent.
The number of chambers that they represent is 145 across the province, and that represents approximately 60,000 businesses.
To Stephen, has staff considered as the deputy had asked about or questioned the economic impact of this and the impact assessment value in their analysis of it all?
One of the considerations, through the chair, one of the considerations when council approved the program last year was that through the impact, and the delegate spoke to the old rules of how we transitioned current value assessment. But in the recent years, MPAC has been taking into consideration in their valuation of properties the ongoing vacancy or vacancy rates as part of their income calculations, and there have been appeals on that to fight for that from the business perspective. We haven't looked specifically at the economic impact. The issue here is one of tax fairness. The rebates are funded by the remaining property taxpayers.
Right. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
Well, I'm going to speak actually to Councillor Starr in that I don't think you'd get 2/3 to reopen it at this time. We just had the vote recently, so that it would be a shame to try to reopen it today and have it fail. I like the idea, though, from what you've presented for a report to come forward, possibly the first meeting in January, to do a reevaluation of it and a second look, based on what you've suggested and a little bit of research on our staff. I don't support reopening it today, but I do support continuing to look at this because it's obviously important. And property values have kind of leveled off a bit. Real estate's slowing down. Some businesses that I know in my area are having trouble. So I don't mind taking the temperature every 6 months or so, and at some point we might change our minds, but I don't think you'd get 2/3 today. And thanks for coming.
Okay, Councillor Parrish, would you move receipt then of the report and seconded by Councillor Raz? Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, David. Keep up the good work at the Mississauga Board of Trade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, councillors.
That takes us right into items related to Public Works. Councillor Starr.
Yeah, we're okay there. An update on the waste collection contractor performance. I think, Norm, are you going to give us a verbal?
We could probably get through this without.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm here today to provide an oral update on the performance of one of Peel's waste collection contractors, Emterra. I'm going to start with just a brief history. In June of 2017, staff reported on the performance of both of the contractors' performance from 2016. We reported back again in January of 2018, expanding on the Emterra performance. That report indicated, it indicated that performance of Emterra was not where we wanted it to be. It reported that Emterra had submitted an action plan to add trucks, add drivers, and improved how they managed their operations. At that time, we recommended, I think or we said we would allow Emterra to implement the action plan to add the trucks drivers and improve management. We said we would monitor Emterra's performance, and if significant and sustained improvements were not made over the first 2 quarters of 2018, we'd begin utilizing other powers available to the commissioner in the contract to improve performance. We were also asked at that meeting to report back if Emterra failed to add the trucks or if they failed to improve performance. They have added the trucks, they have not improved performance, so we're here today reporting back. So as I said, they have added the trucks. They continue to struggle to get enough drivers each day, and they continue to struggle with how they manage their operation. The result is worse service, ongoing late and missed collections. I have a few graphs that kind of show how those have gotten worse and not better. I'm just going to remind everybody the collection zones for the 2 contractors. Emterra collects the entire pink area. Waste Connections collects the yellow area. And just on the geography and the way these different areas present themselves, the 2 south areas are somewhat similar in density and housing types. The north area, of course, includes very large rural tracts where houses are farther apart, trucks have to drive further in between. But I will say that while the geography of these areas is different, the requirements are not. We were very clear when we put this contract out to tender that we expected waste to be collected every day by 6 p.m. Contractors had to bid accordingly. They had to take into account the geography and the kind of urban makeup of the different areas when they put their bids together, and they did all, in fact, commit to meeting the requirement of getting waste off the road by 6 o'clock. I just want to show, this graph kind of shows the total tonnage of waste collected by each of the contractors. This includes blue bin, green bin, yard waste, and garbage. The green lines are for Emterra. The blue lines are for Waste Connection. Obviously, Emterra has a bigger area, more houses, so they collect more waste. It also shows the dashed line is 2017 and the solid line is 2018. And what we see when we look at 17 compared to 18 is tonnage was actually a bit higher in May of 2018. And the reason for that is because we had a late spring this year. Last year, spring arrived in April, and we had a lot of yard waste showed up in April, and it kind of leveled off a bit in May. This year, it all kind of hit in May. So I'm just going to go through, I think I have 4 graphs that show the performance, a couple of comparisons on late collections and a couple on missed collections. So a late collection is any home that is collected after 6 p.m. but actually collected the day it's supposed to be collected. So we can see from this, this graph compares Emterra to Waste Connections for the first 5 months of this year. And we can see that Emterra was late quite a few more times than Waste Connections. Even if you account for, I think Emterra has about 70% more households to collect from. The graph is obviously more than 70% more than the blue one. This graph compares Emterra to itself from 2017 to 2018. And you can see the blue graph, their performance in 17, they had some struggles around this time. This year, they actually had far worse performance, especially through the month of May. Although we have been tracking their performance since the beginning of the year, and it's hard to see in that kind of flat part at the bottom of it, but they've been consistently worse this year than they have last year, even before the big tonnage came in May. So we're now going to look at missed collections, and these are occurrences where somebody's waste is not actually collected on the day it's supposed to. They have to go back the day after to collect it. And again, when we compare Emterra to Waste Connections, Emterra missed a lot more than Waste Connections. The other thing we found was the type of waste collected and how long it took them to go back and collect were very different. Waste Connection was able to limit the missed collections mostly to yard waste, which is the one residents are probably the most tolerant of having sit overnight and picked up the next day. Emterra was not. They missed all 4 types of business from different houses. They missed some people's green bins, some blue bins, garbage, some yard waste. The other thing is, in almost every occurrence, Waste Connection was able to go back the next day and collect the missed waste. So people, it was out one day, then the next day they got to bring their bins back in. Not so with Emterra. They had quite a few occurrences where it took 2, 3, 4, and sometimes even 5 days to go back and collect the missed waste from residents. I heard from some residents who weren't particularly happy about that. Comparing Emterra to itself over the last 2 years, again, we see performance is much worse this year than last year. So what do we do about it, I guess, is the big question. And I've listed 4 options that I think are the 4 main options available to Peel in doing this. We can do more of the same. We can ask them for action plans. We can ask them to improve this stuff. Staff is convinced that if we do more of the same, we will get more of the same, and we're not recommending that option. We have the ability, the contract allows the commissioner to direct Emterra to add resources. We could do that, and it's not something I'd recommend for a couple of reasons. One is we'd have to really understand their operation a lot more and get into operations management on their behalf to be able to really direct what they should do. The second thing is, if let's say we direct them to add 10 more trucks, they may fall short in some other area and it might not improve things, and then we have no guarantees that what we tell them to do they will do well. So we tend to shy away from that unless we really have to, which kind of brings us to the final 2 options, and they're both allowed. The commissioner can do each of these in the contract. We can remove routes from Emterra, or we could terminate the contract. And I think you'll see in the next steps, staff is suggesting we proceed with 3 instead of 4 at this time, just because it's a little bit it's less intrusive. If it doesn't work, we can always try 4 later. But if we try 4 now, you can never go back to 3 because the contract's done. It's also you can implement number 3 faster than you can implement number 4. If you terminate the contract, you have to kind of go through a long process to get a new contractor in place. For the entire contract, that's about a 1-year process, which is very long. So the next steps, again, staff being convinced that things will not get better unless we do something differently. We intend to remove what we call 1 route from Emterra. So that's what a truck collects in a day. A truck usually collects about 1,200 homes in a day, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but they assign trucks to go collect routes. And you would do that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We don't collect waste on Friday. So that's basically moving that work off their thing. And a route consists of 4 trucks. So if I come into Chair Dale's area to collect waste, if we're going to move it over to the contractor, I don't want to move just the garbage and leave the blue box with the old contractor. So you would move garbage, green bin, blue bin, and yard waste over to the new contractor. We would then monitor performance, and if performance does not improve, we could consider removal of addition routes or application of other remedies that are available under the contract. And that's it for me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking for a comment, but I saw the chair looking. Anyway, Councillor Pelletier.
Thank you, Mr.
Sorry.
Chair. I think Norm, we talked about it a little bit last time, and I was kind of teetering on that, pulling the plug or trying to work with the contractor. I think, Councillor Innes, myself, and some of the members of the Committee of Waste, we understand how much staff have worked with the contractor to try and get the services met for our residents. Unfortunately, since the last discussion, my call volume has increased when I really wanted it to decrease. It's one of the most requests that I get as a councillor as of right now, where a lot of constituents are calling, and whether it's, some that are missing, their recycling hasn't been picked up for 6 weeks, or some that are noticing a lot of the garbage that are going into the bins happen to be flying around, and the contractor not taking an opportunity to get out of the truck and to pick those up. And that's huge, especially when a senior calls you almost in tears because they don't want that garbage going into their hedges or blowing down the street. So there are issues, and we understand that, but I think that it's kind of time to pull that plug. The plug not being cancel the contract, but to start to remove those routes to see if, we can make some of our constituents for the routes that do get changed a little bit happier. Hopefully I'm in the front of the line. Probably won't happen. We'll have to look at efficiencies, but I'd like to move a motion supporting staff removing the routes from Emterra, so option number 3. I don't want to muddy the motion too much. I would like it a little bit clear. I know that staff does have the best interest of the residents at heart, and they'll continue to work through that process. So I'd like it to be as simple as that. I also have a resolution from Brampton City Council. We discussed this at council yesterday, that I'd like to add into the agenda. I know that's going to require 2/3, but I think it was important for me to add it at this point. It's just requesting that, or it's mentioning that Brampton City Council supports my position and other members of Regional Council in this option. And I think the clerks have a copy of that. And with that, so I think Councillor Innes is going to second the motion that I've moved to support option 3. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Innes.
Thank you, and yes, I'm happy to second it. I agree with Councillor Pelletier. The call volumes that I've been taking predominantly have been with regards to garbage, waste collection being missed, being late. I'm getting calls from parents about waste trucks picking up after hours when their kids are out playing on the streets, and concerns about how it's being handled. So organic bins being dumped over and organics being spewed across the street. That being when some of our newer urban areas are experiencing issues with rodents, only compounds the issue and the frustration and the upset of the residents. So I think we've followed the contract and we've asked them to step it up, and unfortunately they failed. And I think that our priority is ensuring the adequate customer service level for our residents. So that's why I'm happy to second the motion today, and hopefully this resolves the issue and we don't have to take it another step further. But I think that this is a clear message to our contractor that we are willing to take those steps if they're absolutely necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hate to argue with my colleague across the table, Councillor Pelletier, but yesterday's motion was to address the poor performance. It wasn't necessary to address option 3 because we didn't know option 3 yesterday. I don't support option 3, and unless you can convince me, and I'll tell you why. I don't think it gives us any guarantees that anything's going to change. Just because we take routes away from them doesn't mean their performance is going to get any better. And my constituents, judging by the amount of calls I'm getting, want these guys fired. When they're getting, pickup on Wednesday and they don't get it until Saturday, the last one was and you probably know from the amount of calls we got, and I had called a few times, picked up on late Saturday afternoon, that's way too long, way too long. First, I meant to say right at the beginning, first of all, staff have done a tremendous job in regards to when we call, when our constituents call. And so I don't want any of my comments to reflect on the staff. I think the staff we have done a tremendous job in trying to deal with this problem. And I solely blame the pickup people for all the problems. But I personally would rather terminate and try to find a way to get a new group in, unless the other councillors are willing to switch the yellow and the pinks back and forth, and maybe they can experience, and part of my ward is in the yellow, but not all of it. The majority of my ward is in the pink. I don't think the people that have areas in the yellow realize just how bad the pink areas have been getting it. And just by taking routes away doesn't guarantee my residents that anything's going to change, Norm. So I don't know. Maybe you need more better to convince me. I want to trust staff on this one. But here's the dilemma I'm in. When we did this, the change the last time, and when we started with this group, I had calls because, let's be honest, the transition into all this was difficult at the beginning. And we all had calls. I think we all had calls. I know I did. And I told the constituents, be patient. We're not with Waste Management anymore. We've got a new group here. We got to be patient. It's a transition. Well, somebody threw that back in my face the other day, and said, you told me to be patient and I'm patient. This is ridiculous. And I said, you're right. It is. We've been let down. We've been let down by these contractors. That's when we said be patient with them, or I said be patient with them. And then we've had nothing but problems, and your graphs show it. They just got worse. They didn't get any better. And then last time, we said, well, we've done some things. They've added trucks. I said to people, they've added trucks. They're going to get better. They got worse again. So, when do we cut the line? Like, I don't want to give them another chance. I don't want to say to my constituents, well, now we've taken routes away and it's going to get better. Quite frankly, I won't say that again, because I'm not going to support going to option 3. I want to terminate, I want to start over, and I know it may be difficult, but the amount of calls that I've been getting from people, and my staff have been getting, they want them fired. They don't want to deal with these people anymore. They don't want to be calling all the time and waiting till Saturday to get pickup. And I know the staff are going out there and picking up some of this stuff. They shouldn't have to. You guys shouldn't be having to go out and cover for a bad contractor. And I know you're doing that, and I thank the staff that are doing that, because it makes me look good when they do go out there. But we shouldn't have to do that. And I can't, in good conscience, say to my constituents any longer, be patient. It's going to get better. We're cutting back routes. So Norm, unless you can convince me, it's going to get better, which I know you can't. You can't guarantee me anything. I'd rather just terminate and start fresh. Or take the other group and switch the colors around. I say that in jest. I don't want to do that to the council members that got good or half-decent pickup, but that's just my feeling. Thank you. Sorry for being so long.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish.
Well, I'm not going to support terminating the contract. That's an extremely complicated process. It's going to cause more trouble than you could imagine. And I believe that would be an irresponsible act on our part. But I also don't believe that canceling one route's going to make a big difference. I think you should consult with them. Sometimes when you go to the doctor and the doctor says you need major surgery, they give you 3 or 4 options, and at that point you stop fighting the fact that you don't believe you're sick. And you say, okay, tell me the truth, and then I'll tell you what's going to be the least painful and most productive for me. So perhaps if you go to them and sit down and say, we're taking away at least one route, how would you react if we took away 2 or 3? Would it give you breathing space to get up to speed and get your people trained? I think you should consult with them. I would hope the motion would say to remove up to, or at least one route. And perhaps they will come back to you and say, take two and give us a chance, because we've added trucks. We'll now have more trucks on the road to serve fewer routes, and maybe we can pull our act together. I don't, first of all, absolutely don't want you to cancel the contract, not when I'm going into an election, even though I'm in the good area. But I think it reflects badly on all of us. And secondly, I think you should give them the option to cry uncle and say, yeah, we'd be better off if you take two routes away. So if we say a minimum of one, I'll support that.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Sato.
Thank you. I guess my concern is that you're suggesting one route, which is 1,200 households out of 209,000 households. I think it's a drop in the bucket, and I don't think we're going to notice. Depending which route you take it off, that route might notice, but the rest of us aren't going to have any difference at all. And, you know, I doubt that removing 1,200 households in one truck is going to help Empterra become more efficient with the other routes that they have. It's just not enough. I don't agree with terminating the contract right now, because then we would have garbage sitting and nobody would pick it up. How many routes? I assume if you remove the route, you would be giving it to Waste Connections to do the pickup, correct?
Sorry, 99.9% correct, yeah. That's our first choice. It is allowed, the contract does allow us to add work to Waste Connections.
Okay, how many could they take? How many routes could
Well-
Waste Connections provide?
And that's the challenge, and just a small correction on your math. One route is 1,200, but it's a route on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so there's 4 routes, so it's a total of about 5,000 houses out of
200.
which it's still a
Still a
small
small.
number, but it's big, so if
It's
you...
a little
if you-
bigger
if-
drop in the bucket, but not
If you
much.
did 2 routes, you're now up at, 5% of the contract. We did look at different numbers, and we have had some preliminary conversations with Waste Connections about adding them. And there's a concern about moving too many at once, because it's a challenge, to add new routes and manage that. And
So
the
how
spec-
many, I guess you didn't answer my question, how many could they provide, how many could they do if they had to?
They asked if we could start with one route just to try, but they
Yeah.
said they can add a new route. Like, it takes them maybe 6 weeks to add a route to
Okay.
get trucks. They said we can add, so, and some of the, I don't disagree, 1,200 out of 200,000, not going to make a huge difference.
No, it's not.
Physically, maybe mentally it might make a difference
Well,
to them that we're
To
now
to
a little
1,200
more serious.
households, but not to the others.
And we're happy, I'd be happy to say, minimum of one or something, something to know that it could easily be more. It's just, we'll have to go back and do it in kind of a logical sequence
Well,
way to
I
make
would
it.
like to see the recommendation that would give you the flexibility to move more as you're able to. But if nothing improves, I think you need to have the direction today to look at much stronger actions, because without waiting until we're back here in December. If over the next 2 or 3 months, nothing changes, you've lost half a year of really, really poor service, and then you're starting all over again in December or January when council comes back in, and then you start the process. So is there some way that we can word the resolution today that would give the commissioner some flexibility in, first of all, if you start with one, adding as many as you need, moving over as many as are necessary to achieve what we want to achieve, which is the garbage and the recycling, especially the organics, to be picked up. I mean, that's the ultimate. And that we don't put, a cap on it. If you have to move them all over, move them all over, if you can do it. And if, in fact, you do need to look at, down the road, terminating the contract, that would give you some flexibility in at least looking at the market to see what is out there, who else is out there that could do the job. I'd just like to give you that flexibility so over the next 6 months, we're not just sitting here, fielding complaints. I think, Jeanette.
I think the commissioner wants to make a comment.
Yeah.
My waving hands was the first indication. Through the chair, if I could address Councillor Sato's comments and some of the others that I've heard. Under the contract, I have the authority, because you've given it to me already, to take all the steps necessary up to and including termination of the contract. I'm hearing loud and clear that service has to improve. And it doesn't. It needs to progressively, subject to the feasibility of getting our other contractor to pick up routes, that we have to keep moving in that direction till we get to a level of service that our clients and you expect. So I have that. So technically, we don't need a resolution.
Okay.
And if you do feel the need to do one, I would keep it broad to say, take up to, that type of resolution that's broad and gives me the authority. It also sends a very strong message to our contractor and to your constituents, our collective constituents, that you're not satisfactory and we're willing to take whatever steps are necessary to get the service to where it needs to be.
Thank you, and I'm happy with the wording in Councillor Peleshi's motion. That covers that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you. Can we, I was going to ask them to put the motion up on the floor. Okay, that's it? Okay, thank you. I guess I got my point across, which is what I was trying to do. I'm just relaying my frustration from my constituents' frustration. And Janet, thank you very much for getting back to me quickly the other day on this and assuring me it was going to be on the agenda. I don't want to do anything drastic, but the way we were going, I don't think was enough. And I think maybe we've got something now that we can support. And after hearing from the commissioner, I'm a little more comfortable now that if this doesn't work, that we will quickly react the next time and not wait so long. I would like, though, some assurance, I don't need to change the motion to do it, but some assurance that regardless of how this worked, the staff report back in a very timely manner, and not in December after I'm gone, but maybe in a month or two to say, okay, this is what, first of all, maybe I should ask the question, how long will it take for you to take one or two routes, what it might be, and change it over? How long will that take? Norm?
Sorry, how long does it take?
If we make a decision today, and how long will it take you to do that transition?
The preliminary discussions we had is it would take about 6 weeks for Waste Connections to get trucks and drivers in place to take it over. So if we make a decision today, it's like 6 weeks, and then each time it's about the same. So we have to react very quickly. We will have discussions with them about the ability to add more trucks at one time, which they can do. They're a big company. It's a matter of, like everybody, finding the drivers to get in the seats for them. But
So then let me ask the person who holds the big stick, the commissioner. If it takes that long, that shocks me and scares me at the same time. If it takes that long to do it, what happens in the next 6 weeks? If this group, even though you've said, well, okay, this is what we're going to do, gets worse or continues on this path. And 6 weeks from now, when you're about to change over, our constituents have still, and you know, if my area was in, if my, bulk of my area was in the yellow, I wouldn't be concerned right now. But it's not, it's in the pink, and that's where, that's my concern. What happens if it doesn't get better in the next 6 weeks, while we're trying to transition this by taking away one route or maybe two?
You know, I don't have a firm answer to that, but what I'll say, what we will do, we will talk to Waste Connections about doing this more quickly. Even if, you know, they can bring in trucks from their commercial fleet, that sort of thing. So we will do our best to make it shorter than 6 weeks. We'll also talk to them about doing a larger tranche, either the initial one, do more, or start a second one to start getting ready, because my gut tells me that removing one route, like the councillor said, is not going to change it a lot, that we'll have to do at least two. So we'll have those conversations.
That makes me feel better. That it really does. Next question, where? I think I'm the angriest here.
Somewhere in the, somewhere in the pink area.
This is what Councillor Parrish does, you know, she gets angry and then she gets her way, so I'm learning from her. It took me 27 years, but if I get angrier, will I get it in my area? I don't know.
I think it has to be where it makes most sense operationally to do it, and that might be in your ward, it might be in Councillor Peleshi's ward, it might be in somebody else's ward, but we have to look operationally and do what makes.
I just hope the council members that are in the yellow here understand, you know, how bad we have had it. You guys have had it pretty good, consider, you know, judging by what we've seen today, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse, so. Okay, thank you. I'm a little more comfortable, and I can support now that we know that we're giving the staff the opportunity to do two routes and maybe take even more drastic measures if need be. Thank you.
I don't think you're the most angry if Councillor Mahoney jumped up and down. He says, "Your chair, fix it." So, and then, you know, it's all around. There's 3 or 4, and I'm only jesting, but I mean, it's a problem, and I like the solution so far. So, anyway, Councillor Peleschi.
Thank you, Councillor Starr. And if we're talking about who's angriest, well, I'm really mad. Really mad. I wanted this just to be a simple motion because I do not want council getting involved with the managing and the operational aspect of it. Like the commissioner said, they do have full authority to do this. I think that this is just a good, strong gesture, a strong show of support to staff to say, yes, we do have faith in you. Look, a lot of the people that call in love our staff here at the Region of Peel, and we always get compliments, whether it's Garnet or Norm or whomever. They're great to deal with, and they work very hard in this unfortunate situation. It's going to continue to be a little bit unfortunate for a little while. 6 weeks is a long time, and then 6 weeks after that, and 6 weeks after that, until things get better. It's sad. I wish we would have pulled the plug. Saying it now, I wish we would have pulled the plug last year, but we didn't. And so I think that staff are going to take, like they have been doing, some special attention to the areas that are going to be changing, mainly a lot of the problem areas too, specifically Ward 2 and 6 in Brampton. And so I thank council for the support of this, and now that somebody else is on the board. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Councillor Groves.
Thank you. I'm just going to throw Bolton in there as well, because Councillor Peleschi, so you're close to Bolton. But I will say, Norm, every week I have complaints, and I've got streets that are missed entirely. And then I have streets where they pick up some and not the other. But I will say to Garnet, and I know Garnet's sitting in the audience, every time I reach out to Garnet, it's done. They are there. Region of Peel is there to pick up the slack, and certainly on behalf of my residents who very much appreciate the service that the region provides, I would like to say thank you and recognize Garnet and his staff for what they do, picking up the slack. I do support the motion, and I think that at this point, this is really the only option that we have. So I will be supporting the motion, and then I guess, Norm, we just see what happens as we move further down the road. So, yep, I'm putting Bolton on the table, too.
Can I just respond really quickly? And I appreciate the councillor's kind words for staff. I know Garnet's here and Andrea's here. I'm not sure if Alan's here, like the team that go out, and they're in the trenches every day trying to make things better out there, and some days are tougher than others, and it really buoys their kind of spirits when they hear council say kind things like that. So I really appreciate those words from each of you.
And I do think it's important, Norm, because we always come and we complain, just like, right? But we really never give the recognition. Now, I don't think that the region should be picking up the slack, but they do, and they do make us look really good. So, and again, my residents do appreciate it, and so do I. Thank you.
Okay, call the question. Oh, can I do that? We have to have a two-thirds motion to add the correspondence from Councillor Pelleshi that's in front of you, and this is a recorded vote. Hey? I'm going to listen for the clerk's advice. Okay.
Go for it.
It's
You gotta vote.
correspondence. Oh, yeah.
You got to vote.
Okay? Just following the clerk's advice. It appears the vote passes. It was a tight one. Okay, we need the motion now from Councillor Pelleshi and Innes. I think it's in front of you, a recorded vote. Again, a very tight vote. Passes. Mr. Chair, we've got two small items on here just for receipts. Do you want to just go through this before we break, or it's up to you? Yeah, okay. 8.3, Brampton Brick update. The proposal is for information here in front of you. Anybody from Brampton? Councillor Pelleshi?
Thank you, Chair Starr. I'll be really quick. In the minutes of settlement, is it typical that when we are at that table, that we are not, we do not contribute to the minutes of settlement? Are we? I found it odd that it was between, two of the parties when we were also an appellant.
You're right to observe that usually as a party, we would be a party to the minutes of settlement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's for information and receipt? No, nothing? Okay. The next.
You got to call vote.
Oh. All in favor? I'm trying to get this done as quickly as possible. 8.4, private noise attenuation wall conversion program. For information again.
I got a question on it.
You got a question, Councillor Carlson?
Oh, thanks very much. Actually, more of a comment and a question. I want to thank staff for coming out and looking at a noise wall up along Derry that's blowing down, poor condition. But despite the fact that it's pretty sad, it's in that short to medium term deficiency. And in speaking with Gary, he pointed out that our plan, a 30-year plan. Yesterday we had a 95-year plan for cycling in Mississauga. I thought that was a long time. The 30-year plan is a little better, I guess. But he did mention, which is obvious, that with climate change, the weather blowing these fences over at a much quicker rate than our money will last. So there's too many fences left at the end of the money. So I've noticed, if I'm reading this right, you're adding about $1 million a year extra onto what you thought you were. I hope I'm reading this correctly, maybe through you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, yes, we would need to contribute with the current plan, as it sits in the report, an additional $1 million a year into the reserves to fund that program.
But that's not through you, Mr. Chair, that's not an increase in what we're already doing. That's just to fund what you had in mind here on the chart. Well, I would just point out to council that noticing the state of the noise walls and the effects of wind and weather on them, that I'm hopeful maybe through the budget process that we keep an eye on this for ramping it up, particularly in the short term. It may be well and good to say we've got it laid out for the next 30 years, but Mother Nature doesn't exactly give a darn about what year the fence gets blown over. And we're telling homeowners, well, it's your maintenance problem. One thing when the boards are leaning a little and so on, but when the whole sections blow away, you're sort of left with a big repair job, a little bit more than the average homeowner. So I'm hoping that at least in our budgeting process, we're retaining a certain amount of flexibility in this, because it just won't be as lockstep as 4 fences a year for 4 years and so on. It might be a little messier than that. And governing thing of the windstorm last night, when Councillor Starr lost a big tree in his yard. And, he's aware of what wind can do now. Prior to that, I'm not sure. But he's pretty aware of it now, so.
I'm smiling.
Oh, you are? Okay, good.
Not paying attention to you.
I don't have a motion in mind, but I'll be kind of watching this, because you may have to revisit this just to stay ahead of it, and in a half-decent way. Okay, and thanks very much for meeting me on site to look at that section as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cullerson. Councillor Parrish.
Yes, the Finch construction photos in there are in my ward, and I wanted to thank the region and thank them for cooperating with the city to complete that wall. The residents complained like mad before it went in, and not one of them phoned to thank me. Isn't that funny how that happens? Yeah. And I'll probably ask them to put a lawn sign up, and they're going to go, no, don't touch anything. Anyway, thank you very much. This was, you could see from the fencing there, it was a mess. And they're, I'm sure, very happy. I'm just being a smart aleck. Thank you very much to staff.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Thompson.
Well, first of all, I want to echo staff, and I know we got walls down in wards 5 and 4 as well on regional roads. But 2 questions I have. First one is, with the new developments that are taking place, once this is voted in favor of going forward, are we going to be able to get the new fences effective to be put on regional property versus private property?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. That's already being done now. So new developments, as the development applications come in, instead of the fence being put on the private side, it's being put right on the property line. And that way, it doesn't have to be moved in the future when it needs to be reconstructed. The region can take care of that work.
Well, as we speak, we've got Emerald Cove Parkway, and that's why I'm just wanting to make sure we got it corrected. The second thing is, we're coming up with a DC bylaw. And I know a lot of times we get the development to do that, so are we going to make the corrections on the DC bylaws as well?
Short answer is yes. There's 2 types of noise wall replacements that we do. So I'll give you 2 examples. So there's pieces, say on Coleraine Drive, that have blown over. When that wall reaches the time to be reconstructed as part of our program, that would be funded through tax. There's sections on Dixie Road in Councillor Miles' ward that they're also in bad state of repair, but the need to replace them with something different was actually triggered by an environmental assessment associated with a road widening, and that's financed through growth. So there's 2 different types of financing, and it really depends if the wall's simply being replaced based on condition, or if it's being replaced based on the need to actually widen the road, and that's changing the noise levels.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Well, thank you. And I think my questions or issues partly been responded to. The biggest challenge that we have is that calls come into our office when the fences are falling into disrepair, and nobody knows who owns them. In other words,
It's not that, oh, somebody knows. It's just that the homeowner is not clear. And so I don't know how we get that message out, because we do still have a patchwork quilt in terms of some of those fences that were installed by a builder that are falling into disrepair, but when they're backing onto a 6-lane road, so when they get replaced, it will be the region that does it, but not in all cases. I don't know how we communicate out to residents so that they understand what their responsibility is in terms of maintenance of those fences. Some of them just let them fall into disrepair because they believe that they belong to somebody else and that somebody else will be replacing them. I know the city at one point changed the standard from when they were on private property, from the concrete fences to a concrete pillar with wood in between, because of the cost to the homeowner when it came time to replace them. And then at some point in the future, it gets changed and the region or the city is going to take responsibility. So there isn't a standard scenario out there where these fences exist. And so we always have to go on this little hunting expedition at the time, and you'll have, a row of houses where a couple of the fences are in really bad shape and others where they're in less bad shape and could last a little bit longer. You're smiling for some reason. I'm sure you've got a great answer.
No, I don't have a great answer. It also links to Councillor Carlson's point. So just to give council a little bit of background, we actually crafted this report prior to that windstorm that happened 6 weeks ago, and spent the last 6 weeks trying to do an inventory of what actually fell down. I can tell council during that period of time, I know you've all had a lot of calls and we've talked to a lot of you about damage, and our staff have had a tremendous number of calls too. We've completed the inventory, and just to repair those sections. So under these would all be privately owned, and under the existing policy, the owner of the home is responsible to maintain them until the time comes that the region actually reconstructs them and moves them to the property line and brings them into region ownership. So based on the damage, there's actually, 15 or 16 different sections of wall totaling about 1 kilometer in length. But they're, it's like a smile missing teeth here and there. So we've looked at it to do spot repairs, would be $1 million, $1.1 million in construction costs if the region decided to direct staff to do it, and plus ancillary costs to do design and whatnot. Maybe there's some utilities in the way. Staff's assessment is that probably doesn't make a lot of sense, because the next windstorm, it would just be different teeth missing from the same smile. Our recommendation, if we were going to advance the program, would be actually to do it right, so do it once.
Yeah.
Instead of doing the program over 30 years, condense the time frame. Start the design work now on the most critical needs and move that forward. And we do have some numbers if that's an option council wanted to entertain. But it is challenging also for staff, because the current policy is, we've helped people clean up the mess and put up temporary fencing, but it's up to the owners to maintain them until they're actually reconstructed.
Yeah, and I think that that ownership responsibility message is not perhaps getting out or being as clear as it should be. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm a little disappointed to see on page 2 the listing on Dairy Road, the Mill Creek. First of all, they do not belong to the homeowner. The region built those and paid for them 100%. And they're not that old. So to see them on the list as deteriorating, do we have any more information as to why? I mean, it sounds like the posts didn't last. Obviously, we didn't, the region did not build them well. What are the contractor?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can't speak to that one specifically, but a lot of the walls that blew over in the windstorm, and this may be the same case, we actually did a visual condition assessment of the walls and determined them to be in reasonably good shape. And they blew over, and the reason they were blowing over is the rot, or the damage to
On the
the
uprights.
fence was actually below the ground. So the fence posts are rotting below the ground. I know the ones, even the wooden posts or the wooden fences we put in Councillor Carlson's ward, we actually put in a steel post. It's like a steel I-beam. The fence connects to that, and then it's got a cedar facing on it. So they do stand up a lot better. I'd have to look into the ones specifically on Derry.
Okay, but just to clarify, the ones on Derry that are on page 2 belong to the region. They do not belong to the homeowners. We built those fences when we were adding the lane around Mill Creek, when we did the environmental assessment for Derry Road. So the region fully funded that, and they were built on regional property, not
I will commit to looking into that.
Thank you.
Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess, Gary, my question is with respect to the Coleraine piece, and I know it's on the short to medium term, and we're looking at 2022 to 2024. Mayor Thompson mentioned the Emilco Parkway. When that road was built, the Coleraine piece, we widened the road, and I think a lot of it was attributed to growth. And that's also, I believe, is a goods movement, part of the whole goods movement network. So I'm just wondering, would that not be funded through DCs because it's growth-related?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd have to look at it specifically, but my assumption would be that the four-laning of Coleraine, this was done by the town back in the day. They would have anticipated the four-laning of Coleraine when the noise studies were done for the developments, and the noise walls would have been built, having regard for the future state of what Coleraine would look like. Again, I can look at that one specifically. I don't know it off the top, but quite often the developer-built noise walls take into account the future state if there's a known widening planned.
Yeah, okay. I guess we can talk offline. Thank you.
Okay. Somebody want to move this?
Yeah.
Councillor Groves, Mayor Thompson, all in favor? Hand vote. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we'll break for lunch and come back in half an hour. We're back in session. Items related to health have been dealt with through the consent agenda. That brings us to items related to human services. Councilor Medeiros, if you'd kindly chair this section, please.
Thank you, Chair Dale. Members of Council, you have item 12.3 before you, update on the Region of Peel centralized waiting list for housing in 2017. Are there any questions or comments? Mayor Jeffrey.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I read this report, and I guess it's pretty troubling. And I want to thank staff for putting this report together. But it's pretty sobering when you learn that our wait list has increased by 13.3%, and our population has only increased by 6.5%. So those are pretty troubling numbers. So I guess what I wanted to say is I'd like to do something more than just receive the report. I traveled to Halifax at the beginning of June for the FCM Big City Mayors conference with Mayor Crombie, and at the time there was some fairly robust conversations amongst the mayors from across Canada. And although we're really grateful that the federal government has spoken to a national housing strategy, there wasn't a single mayor around the table that had received a check. So I think although this wait list, forgive my language, tinkering is tightening up the process, we have a problem in that we have a lack of housing, period. That the supply is a problem. And we heard this morning about human trafficking and lack of housing options, and whether it's human trafficking or youth or abused women, victims of assault, we don't have enough housing, period. So I guess what I wanted to say is this housing strategy, whether it's in Brampton or Mississauga or Caledon, isn't going to improve unless government, and ideally regional government, takes a leading role. And I think municipalities are uniquely positioned to do that. We give out the building permits. So I've drafted a motion. I've passed it to the clerk, and essentially what I'd like us to do is for the cities of Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon to develop a really aggressive advocacy program, a strategy. The motion is here. Councillor Parrish has kindly seconded it. We need to access that federal funding as quickly as possible. Every day that goes by, we miss another opportunity, another season to get either new housing on the ground or to convert existing housing. We have a wait list where people are waiting 6 to 8 years for housing. That's a crisis, and I'm really tired of just saying it's okay, because it's not okay. Whether it's Mississauga or Brampton, we all have a housing strategy that we're putting together, but it doesn't work unless we get some money. So I think what this motion moves, and I spoke with my council about it yesterday, that we collaborate as a region, that we work to accelerate available federal funding. We also reach out to the newly elected MPPs and members of parliament to make sure that they understand that this is an important issue. We need them to also be our advocates where they are. New members don't know about the explosive growth, my guess is in Peel. So this is an opportunity to educate them as to the urgency of this, and also to copy this resolution to the minister when we know who it is, the Families, Children and Social Development, as well as the Premier and all new MPPs. So essentially, call to action. We should be doing something proactive. And I appreciate all the work that Janice and all of her team do on this file. They've been very helpful. We've been able to act quickly in the forms of a youth shelter, and I appreciate that. But it's temporary. And unfortunately, the shelter's usually full. So that's a sign that we really have a capacity issue, so we need to get something going. So I'm asking for council support on this resolution, in addition to receiving the update on the centralized wait list. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Jeffrey. Mayor Thompson?
Yes, thank you, and I'll gladly support the motion. But I'm going to throw something out here is I think this is where we need to be and where we need to go. But I think this needs to be one of our fundamental pillars in the growth management group, because this is key, and it's going to get worse. This is just a snapshot in time, but it's going to be far greater. You look 2-3 years from now, we're going to see it far worse than where we are now, and you've already seen where the growth has happened on more wait time. Question is I'm wondering if we should be reaching out, when I'm saying thinking outside the boxes, reach out to build as well. Because the development industries, they're building as well, and we're trying to intensify where mid-rise and high-rise and everything else. How can we partner with them to be part of helping us be part of the solution? And I agree where you're going, but I think this is something that we should even send a bill to show where we're wanting to go and how can they help.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Parrish?
Yes, it's actually an honor to have been asked to second this, Linda. Thank you very much. I think housing is a human right. I think people sleeping on benches or jammed into little tiny apartments with 12 people living in them is intolerable. I was part, unfortunately, of a federal government years ago that downloaded social housing on the provinces. And most of the provinces took it over and did a good job with it, but Ontario had Mr. Harris at the time, and he just downloaded it further to the municipalities with no money attached to repair. So this motion is timely. It's also, I believe, a federal responsibility, not only to say we've got the money there, but to start distributing it. Mississauga came up with 140 ways to fix housing problems. Every single one of them required money, a pool of money. And if we act responsibly and we use the money to inspire builders and developers to join in with us to provide reasonably priced housing, I think you got to have a pot of money to do that. So Federal election next year, Linda. I think it might be time for us to put on a full court press on this for the next 12 months and make sure they understand that we're very serious about it. And a couple, I guess we're former Liberals, pushing Mr. Trudeau might just make him pay attention. I was only excommunicated the last year. It was the best year I spent up there. There's nothing more to say about this. This is a very good motion, and I thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish. So I believe members of council, we have, Councillor Miles.
Yeah, sorry. I think one of the things that I want to do is ensure that we recognize that a number of policy changes have been made during this term of council that are really helping us to manage the wait list, and they're listed in here. And kudos need to go to staff for, I don't know if a hard-nosed approach is the best way to define this, but certainly saying that a lot of the people on the wait list perhaps shouldn't be there, and that there are ways of tightening things up so that we actually know what we're dealing with this. I don't have any problem with the motion. I think it's a really positive one. The City of Brampton's Housing Committee is up and it's had a couple of meetings, but it would certainly help us, I think, in the City of Brampton to hear from the City of Mississauga as to what it is that you're doing, and also the town of Caledon in regards to, I know you're doing a program with Habitat where you're ensuring that in certain developments, land is becoming available for Habitat in order to build houses. So this really is, I think, an opportunity for us to all share what we're doing at the municipal level. Like, one size doesn't fit all in these programs, but we're dealing with a problem that's not just it's not just housing of homeless people. It's not just housing those in our community who can't even afford traditional housing. This, as everyone knows, it's a much bigger picture. It's about making sure that housing is available to people in different income levels. And so it's something that we need as I think the 3 municipalities in the region to take a look at and ensure we're meeting the needs of all sort of economic groups as well. And so that's sort of where I think we get into different roles and responsibilities, with the region being responsible more for the social housing end of things, and the City of Brampton and Region of Peel Town of Caledon ensuring that we have the proper mix of housing within our municipalities and within our plans for the future. So we need to determine what that's going to look like, and I think it's going to mean that all 3 have to work together and sort out what is going to work and what is not going to work. So, but I mean, advocacy is good. We certainly need to be advocating on all fronts in this regard. So I have no problem with supporting this motion as well, but also happy to move the report that is before you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to add to that, I'm happy to support the motion as well. But when we're talking about housing and affordable housing, does this include housing for seniors as well? Just housing, and it's for everyone. Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Commissioner of Human Services, Janice, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, for council's consideration, I would also recommend that we add the Minister of Housing to the end of the motion in terms of circulating a copy of the resolution.
Okay, great. Thank you for the suggestion. So, members of council, we have a motion with the proposed amendment. Recorded vote, I believe. And it passed. Thank you. And we have a motion by Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Gibson, to receive the report. Is that a recorded vote as well? No? Okay, all in favor? Carried. And back to you, Chair Dell.
Thank you. That brings us to items related to enterprise programs and services. Councillor Miles, if you chair this section, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. 14.1 is the development charge program update, which is here for information. 14.2.
There's a presentation.
There's a presentation on this particular item. Thank you, Stephanie.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of Council. Thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on the region's development charges program. The presentation is first going to provide a brief idea of the framework of the development charges program and the current program update for the last 5 years and current year, as well as some information on risks and how we are managing and mitigating those in the future. The region's growth capital program is informed by the Places to Grow Act by the province. The province prepares population and employment growth forecasts and distributes these forecasts of growth to the municipalities, single tier and regional, which then trickle down into plans locally to implement these growth plans. The province endorses the funding of growth capital investments based on the principle that growth should pay for growth. The region also supports the same principle. However, various restrictions outlined in the Development Charges Act limit the ability to recover the full cost of growth capital, increasing some of the risks for the program over time. Some key restrictions that have been impacting growth include mandatory exemptions, such as industrial exemption expansions, and regional staff did some calculations back in 2014 that put the cost of that at around $5 million a year. We are working to update costs and figures down the road as we look at plans to mitigate. Further Development Charges Act caps the amount that can be recovered for services such as affordable housing, ambulance services, and policing based on an average level of service over the past 10 years. Additionally, there's a mandatory 10% discount on amounts collected on services other than water, wastewater, and roads. As we look to the lag between growth and investment in DC collection, we have to understand that water, wastewater, and roads must be in place in advance of development occurring, which has required the region to borrow externally to help fund the growth program. The reduction of the cost-revenue gap is a key outcome of the Plan and Manage Growth term of council priority. These factors combined present challenges to the growth program's long-term sustainability. It should be noted that development charge revenue has been rising over the past 5 years, but still falls short of our forecasts from our 2015 background study, which are based on the province's population employment forecasts. In 2017, the overall DC revenue forecast was $332.4 million, compared to collections of $247.5. The graph shown in front of you is a representation of the residential revenue and units. Residential revenue has been closer to forecast than non-residential, and for the period of 2013 to 2017, residential has been about 84% of the average annual projected amounts. The non-residential sector has been impacted by the prior recession and corresponding current trends, such as changing nature of employment, which have contributed to some of the shortfall in the revenues from that sector. As we continue to discuss the residential, the reasonably good performance over the period under review is driven mostly by the low-density developments, such as single-unit, detached, and townhomes. High-density developments, including small units and apartments, have only been achieving around 48% of their targets. The slower pace of high-density developments may put achievement of the intensity targets at risk. This area is a key area of focus in our growth management strategy as we move forward. While the overall revenue trend over the past 5 years has been generally on an upward path, there has been noticeable reduction in revenue in 2017 compared to 2016. Revenues from all 3 municipalities are below the 2015 background study forecasts, but for the period of 2016 to 17, we did experience some revenues, significant reductions in the Brampton area. Approximately 3,300 residential units were approved in 2017 compared to the 4,500 forecasted. This is anticipated to affect our revenue by about $150 million for the period of 2017 to 2018 combined. However, city staff at Brampton have anticipated that development will return to normal levels of around 4,500 units in 2019. As the graph shows, however, Brampton is achieving 79% of target, while Mississauga is achieving 81%, and Caledon is around 50% of the forecasted from 2015 study. As noted earlier, one of the larger areas of risk to the program of growth is the trending of the non-residential sector. Non-residential revenues for the period of 2013 to 2017 are only 34% of what was projected of the $694 million. Staff has been carrying out research and analysis on this issue, and preliminary indications are that structural changes in the employment sector, driven largely by advances to technology, and increased numbers of employees working from home or having no fixed place of work are affecting this. Staff, through the growth management strategy work, are collaborating with municipalities and development community to find solutions to these factors. As noted in this presentation, the shortfall in non-residential has been increased by some of the mandatory exemptions provided through the Development Charges Act. In addition, we do provide some discretionary exemptions, estimated around $400,000 annually. Those are contributors to some of the DC revenue reduction. However, for 2019, the costs for the discretionary exemptions will be included in the region's operating budget to reflect them as grants and record them in a transparent tax base. Regional staff are currently working on updating the region's long-term financial planning strategy, with some research being commissioned around changing nature of employment and other socio-economic factors affecting DC and other revenues that should help to inform our risk mitigation. In order to reduce the risk to the growth program's financial sustainability, Council established the region's Growth Management Committee in 2013. The Growth Management Committee work has evolved to include a more integrated and collaborative approach. Key measures and outcomes of the Growth Management Committee work include an annual assessment of DC rates as mandated by Council. An assessment done based on the 2018 capital plan indicate approximately a 14.1% increase in DC rates would be required given the current plan. A 20% projection would trigger an early background study, so at this time we are continuing on the course of our 2019 background study. This measure and alternatives will also be reviewed as we go through the long-term financial sustainability plan update. In order to better manage expenses and reduce the need for borrowing, the region has been monitoring capital expenditures so that projects are timed more in keeping with on-the-ground needs. As a result, capital expenditures between 2013 and 2017 have been less than 50% of what was previously forecasted due to the staging and phasing approach. The region started also to collect hard services DCs sooner in 2016, resulting in about 5 months quicker response. And as of April 2018, around $230 million have been collected sooner, resulting in about $90 million in less debt required, given this reduction between the lag between the revenues and costs. The growth management team, development charge financing, and planning groups within the region are integrating and working with internal programs, as well as with the builder community and local municipalities, to achieve a more integrated approach to growth planning and financing for sustainability. The next slides are graphical representations of some of the expenditure and relevant revenue work. This first chart illustrates the impacts of the region's growth capital expenditure management strategies, which I just discussed. For the period of 2013 to 2017, the region spent less than 50% of what they forecasted, spending $213 million versus the $529 million forecast, due to this timing and phasing of work to closer align to the on-the-ground needs and through improved integration. This graph shows the debt burden that was reduced, as discussed from the creation of the Growth Management Committee until the 2017 actual results. The combined impact of the multiple expenditure management techniques and revenue strategies has resulted in the cost-revenue gap being reduced by $569 million compared to the 2015 DC background study. So the net debt is about $1.2 billion versus the forecast $1.7. Risk to the DC program. The region's growth management strategy has been effective in reducing the cost-revenue gap. However, there are some key risks with new legislation and policies on the horizon that will need effective monitoring and risk response strategies going forward. For example, new provincial legislation and policies regarding secondary suites and municipal comprehensive review guidelines present risks to the region's revenue and cash flow potentials going forward. The region is also seeking to implement or participate in programs and provide incentives to enhance the social and economic development within communities. This might result in pressures to expand discretionary exemptions. Some exemptions will be included in future budgets and transferred to the tax base as a grant program. Examples would be CIPs, affordable housing, and other initiatives where there is a promotion of waiving or deferring DCs, and those should be included as part of the budget process as a discretionary, as a tax exemption or a tax grant. The region does have an outstanding OMB appeal for which we are awaiting decision. The results of that decision will be shared when available, but it could have financial impacts on current and future DC revenue. And when we talk about economic factors, such as the changing nature of employment and less than forecast growth in non-residential sectors, these are risks that must be addressed through growth management work currently underway and in the future. The research being commissioned on the region's current and future socioeconomic environment will help to inform the refresh and update of our long-term financial strategy and help staff to review tools and mechanisms that can address the costs of growth and the maintenance of the DC and growth management policies, as well as other areas of municipal tax and thresholds for sustainability. And lastly, I just wanted to discuss the next steps. As our groups, we will continue to, in collaboration with local municipalities, builders, and the building community on risk mitigation. The 2019 budget for the region will include a base amount to cover some of the current discretionary exemptions within our 2015 DC background. And lastly, recent major developments such as the cancellation of the GTA West Highway have resulted in a delay in the passing of our new DC bylaw to 2019. Originally, this time frame was to be this summer. The local municipalities do have deadlines for their new DC bylaws in spring, summer 2019, and will continue to work towards alignment on policy and technical issues where possible. And the region's current 2015 bylaw does expire in October 2020. Overall, the collaborative and integrated growth management strategy work will continue towards establishing sustainable growth planning and financial framework within the region of Peel. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Raz?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Stephanie. I do wonder what the future of DCs is going to be, especially because of the changing nature of business and commercial. But also the lack of flexibility that we currently see. And I don't know if when we update our next bylaw, we have more of an ability to build in that flexibility. I'll give you an example. When it comes to the forecasted revenues, that's information collected from the lower tier municipalities about what's coming online, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So there's a development in my ward, we approved it in principle, so I would assume that the city would, or the region would take that into account. But then the city goes and puts a hold on the development until it satisfies certain conditions, and that could be another 18 months down the road before they fulfill those conditions. So I think when you work with the municipalities, you have to get a better handle on why the lag. It could be because of those holding provisions that municipalities are placing on those developments that could that could add to that. So that's, you don't need to comment on that. That's just something we need to consider. Are we finding that it's, the municipalities are taking longer to approve projects, especially the higher density ones, because they tend to be more contentious? Are you?
Yeah, I'm not sure if
are
I
we
can
tracking
answer
those?
that piece specifically. It probably would depend on the project and pieces on both sides, but that is part of the integrated work that we're doing. So our planning people would have more of an insight into that side. But our planning and growth management teams work really closely together. In my side, we're doing the DC financing and collection of the revenues piece, so we're also tied very closely to that. So if there is a lag, that does mean we don't see the revenues as soon. So if we're putting infrastructure in, we have to time that as best as possible. Otherwise, we do have that lag where we have, a need for possible debt pieces.
Right. Let's see. I think you answered most of my questions in the plan. When it comes to the new legislation and policies as it relates to secondary suites, what did you mean by that? Does that mean at some point those could potentially be subject to some type of development charge, or what do you mean by that?
The secondary suites legislation has been out there for a while. It hasn't, we don't have regulations on it yet, but essentially it's another set of exemptions so that there is a cost to our program as a whole. I believe a report went last year on the effects of that, but they're quite significant and hundreds of millions of dollars over time. But it depends on how the regulations come forward, so what comes out of that and how the exemptions align. So I think the report was around 250 to 500 million as a cost. But there's also there would also be tax implications as well. But on the DC side, if the exemptions piece comes forward, it's about the secondary units.
Okay, presumably because they're already serviced, so
Yeah,
they wouldn't require those. All right, okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Raz. Stephanie, can you tell me how much we have in our DC account? Are we in the negative?
At this point, I don't have the exact figures with me right now, but I believe we're not in a negative as of yet. We are projecting that we may need to do debt in the fall, but we're aligning kind of those targets with the public works areas and kind of what projects are moving forward. So we're working with the Treasury Services area to align better on cash flow forecasting. And because if we see some of this work go forward, then we will need to borrow in the fall. Otherwise, it won't be until the following year.
So we used to have considerable DC debt, but we've managed to reverse that so that we're in a cash positive position?
No, sorry, we do still have DC debt, so we have about 1.2 billion in debt.
That's what I was
Yes,
asking.
we were
Okay.
able to reduce, the forecast actually within our background study for 2015 said at this time we should be around 1.8 billion in debt, and that's about the movement of projects and better timing. That's been able to reduce the timing of the debt. So, but we will always need debt at certain times to kind of manage the lag between growth and revenue.
We're at 1.2 right
Yes,
now.
that's right.
So is there a point in which we say we've reached our maximum debt limit that we should have when it comes to development charge debt? So that at that time, different measures would come into place in dealing with the debt?
So that's a good point. At this point, we don't have a target of debt, but we do update those forecasts within each background study. So we will have that information in a more fulsome context when we do the next background study. We do follow, obviously, the province's guidelines on ARL, but we're nowhere near that capacity at this point. I think we're about 8.4%. So we're still well within guidelines for borrowing. But as we kind of undertake some of these studies and get some more idea of sustainability in terms of both tax and DC base and where our long-term financial strategy takes us, that will help to inform a lot of these pieces of work.
So our 1.2 billion in debt puts us at an 8.4% debt ratio, which we can go to 25?
Yes, that's correct. And that our debt ratio includes some non-DC as well, but mostly DC.
So the fact that I was looking at the variance between what we projected, and we're 600 million less than what we were projected at the time. How does that feed into our capital program and our capital plans for the future?
So the cost revenue gap being lower is really a recognizing of projects being kind of phased a little bit better to when the pieces are happening, similar to what Councillor Raz's discussion was, in that we're working really closely with the municipalities, with our planning department, and with growth management to align those better. What it means from a finance perspective is we haven't had to borrow that 600 million, which saves us significant interest and borrowing costs. I think to finance our debt right now is about $100 million a year. So that there's a cost to financing debt. So you've got to be very very prudent with how you go forward, and that's why we're trying to make sure we're matching those flows.
What I'm trying to figure out is our large multi-million-dollar capital projects, maybe in sewer and water and roads and whatnot, that were based on the projected growth rates and development charges collected. Because of the slowdown, are we actually slowing down the capital projects as well?
We could be. Again, that's probably more of a planning question as to where they're sitting, and from the programs where they're sitting on their projects. But we do take into account where their projects are at, and kind of when the spending is planned to take place. And then that way we can align any pieces we need to do on a debt side or look at our revenue financing side. So it's really about aligning the pieces.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any other questions then? If none, it's been moved by Councillor Ross. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
presentation. Councillor Reyes. So other than that, we do have a notice of motion from Councillor Innes regarding the Canadian Pacific Rail overpass.
That comes back to me.
That comes back to you.
Yeah.
Okay, back to you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you. There is a notice of motion from Councillor Ennis. Maybe we just bring it up on the screen. And Mayor Thompson's agreed to second it. So take a quick look as a reminder. Councillor Ennis?
This is just, it seems that we are having different standards in dealing with different organizations, whether it's CP or CN, as the region has tried multiple attempts to have them allow us to either put a wrap on it or a banner on it so that it can be easily removed, so that they can do their inspections. They continue to refuse to allow anything to happen, even though CN has found a way around this obstacle. It seems that CP hasn't. So I'm just sort of hoping that with this motion, we can sort of push it forward a little bit, nudge them a little bit more, and perhaps also encourage our MP to nudge it a little bit more, and hopefully find a solution, because it is rather unsightly. It's a beautiful, scenic, beautiful countryside road that is traveled pretty heavily because it is a regional route. And then there's this god-awful big bridge that is rusting and doesn't look well. So that's why I'm bringing this forward, so that if there was a council resolution, in hopes that it would just push it a little bit further. So thank you.
So the motion's before you then. It's been moved by Councillor Ennis, seconded by Councillor Thompson, and it requires a recorded vote, please. And that passes. Thank you. Bylaws, have a motion moved by Councillor Shaughnessy, seconded by Councillor Groves, that the bylaws listed on the Regional Council agenda, being bylaws 34-2018 and 35-2018, be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal affixed thereto. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. In camera, if Mayor Thompson and Councillor Starr would move us into camera? All in favor? Okay, we'll move. Okay, we're back in session. I have a motion moved by Councillor Carlson, seconded by Councillor Parrish, that the May 24th, 2018 Regional Council closed session report be received, and further that the recommendation contained within the confidential report relating to item 19.2 listed on the June 14th, 2018 Regional Council agenda be approved and become public upon adoption, and further that staff be directed to consider a further property in Ward 6 in Mississauga. And that's a recorded vote, please.
Councillor Medeiros?
And that passes. Have a motion moved by Councillor Carlson, seconded by Councillor Gibson, that bylaw 36-2018 to confirm the proceedings of Regional Council at its meeting held on June the 14th, 2018, and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the Region Appeal bylaws related thereto, be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Motion moved by Councillor Raz, seconded by Mayor Thompson, that the meeting be adjourned. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.